What if the next Einstein was a 10-year-old girl, and no one believed her? That was the question Elon Musk found himself whispering aloud, staring at the grainy video on his phone screen for the fourth time in a row. The file had landed in his inbox with the subject line, "You need to see this, it's not fake." Coming from Rajiv, a no-nonsense engineer at SpaceX, it had caught Elon's attention immediately. But even with all he'd seen in his career, rockets landing themselves, AI outthinking human engineers, this video felt different. On the screen, a little girl with frizzy hair and oversized glasses stood in front of a whiteboard in a cluttered classroom. The camera shook a bit, clearly recorded on a phone by a teacher or maybe a parent. In the video, the girl pointed to a complex set of equations involving electromagnetic fields, gravitational interference, and quantum oscillation models. Then she began explaining a theory. Not reciting. Not copying. Explaining. With clarity. With confidence. With the kind of mind that rearranged everything Elon thought he understood about who could be a genius. She couldn't have been more than 10. As the video ended with a round of hesitant applause and a brief cut to a boy whispering, "Dude, she's like a brain alien or something," Elon hit replay again. His assistant hovered outside the glass wall of his office, holding a stack of documents for an upcoming Mars funding meeting. Elon didn't even glance up. He turned the volume down, leaned back in his chair, and muttered, "No way that's real." But it was. He didn't know her name yet. Didn't know where she lived, what her background was, or how she'd learned to discuss things his best engineers debated for hours. All he knew was this: he had to meet her. Not next month. Not next week. Now. And so, with a single command to his assistant, "Drop everything, find her," the gears of one of the world's most influential tech empires began turning to locate a 10-year-old mystery girl from what looked like a public school in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, in a quiet town outside Des Moines, Iowa, Lucy Taylor sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, building a tiny model of a magnetic propulsion device using parts she'd scavenged from a broken microwave and her old RC car. Her room was a jungle of half-assembled inventions. Hanging mobiles of planets rotated lazily from the ceiling. Walls were plastered with hand-drawn equations and crayon-colored theories. On one shelf sat her prized possession, a signed copy of The Martian, gifted by her mom last Christmas with a note, "You're already smarter than Mark Watney." She had no idea Elon Musk had just watched her video. Or that she was about to become the most talked-about girl in the country. All she knew was that physics made her feel less lonely. That her brain didn't slow down even when she wanted it to. That sometimes she didn't fit in, not at school, not even at church where other kids talked about normal stuff like TikTok or soccer. She liked wormholes and the behavior of particles in deep space. And that was okay. Mostly. But some days it wasn't. Back at SpaceX headquarters, Elon's team traced the video back to a Reddit post from a science teacher in Iowa. Username at Mrs. Quark's Rule. The caption read, "My student Lucy just solved a problem I've never seen explained this way. Am I crazy, or is she onto something big?" Elon didn't wait for bureaucracy. He picked up the phone, got the school's number, and made a direct call. A secretary, clearly skeptical, answered. "I'm sorry, who is this again?" "Elon Musk," he repeated, slowly. "I need to speak to whoever teaches physics to Lucy Taylor." 30 minutes later, he was on a Zoom call with Mrs. Carter, a mid-40s teacher with a wide smile and tired eyes. "I'm just as shocked as you," she told Elon. "She started correcting me on vector fields 2 months ago. I started recording her for fun. I didn't expect the internet to explode." Elon leaned closer. "She's the real deal, isn't she?" Mrs. Carter nodded. "She's something else. But she's also just a kid. A very lonely, brilliant kid." The next morning, Lucy's mom, Claire, was getting ready for her 12-hour shift at the local hospital when her phone buzzed. A voicemail. A calm voice said, "Hi, this is Elon Musk's office. We'd like to speak with you and Lucy about an opportunity. We believe she's extraordinary. Claire nearly dropped her coffee. At first, she assumed it was a prank. But within hours, a non-disclosure agreement arrived in her inbox, followed by a flight booking and a full agenda for a special visit to Starbase, Texas. Claire stared at Lucy, who was still in her pajamas, twisting copper wire around a plastic straw. "What did you do?" she asked. Lucy looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why is Elon Musk inviting you to Texas?" Lucy blinked behind her glasses. "Maybe, he wants to talk about gravity." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? You never know when your life's about to change forever. For Lucy Taylor, it started with a question. And for Elon Musk, it started with a girl who made the impossible sound obvious. Lucy Taylor wasn't the kind of kid people noticed at first. She wasn't loud. She didn't dress in bright colors. She didn't raise her hand in class unless she knew, absolutely knew, that the teacher had made a mistake. She lived with her mom in a small, rented two-bedroom house on the edge of Granger, Iowa, a town that didn't even have a stoplight. Their backyard had patches of dry grass, a swing Lucy had built herself from a broken lawn chair, and a cluttered shed she called her lab. If you opened the door, you'd find piles of wires, disassembled fans, half-melted circuit boards, and sketches of machines that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. But for Lucy, it wasn't science fiction. It was just thinking out loud with her hands. Claire Taylor, Lucy's mom, had always known her daughter was different. Even as a toddler, Lucy had an obsession with patterns. She would line up cereal pieces by size, separate socks by temperature suitability, and once created a color-coded system for every toy in the house. Claire remembered the day Lucy turned 6. While other kids were eating cake and opening presents, Lucy had wandered into the garage and dismantled a toaster because she wanted to understand how bread becomes crunchy. She also remembered the first time Lucy came home crying. She was in 2nd grade. "They laughed at me, Mom," she'd said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Because I said friction was why their Hot Wheels slowed down." Claire pulled her into a hug. "Don't let them make you feel small for knowing big things." That became a kind of mantra between them. Lucy's dad. He left when she was 3. No note. No goodbye. Just a pickup truck pulling away one morning and the silence that followed. Claire didn't talk about him much. Lucy didn't ask. But there was a photo taped to the inside of Lucy's closet, faded, curling at the edges, of her dad holding her up on his shoulders at a county fair. Neither of them smiled in the picture. At school, Lucy kept to herself. While other kids were busy trading Pokemon cards or lip-syncing to TikTok dances, Lucy spent lunch reading about quantum tunneling or drawing diagrams of wormhole formations. Her favorite teacher, Mrs. Carter, had once pulled her aside and said, "Lucy, sometimes the world isn't ready for people who see it differently. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're early." Still, being early was lonely. She had no siblings, no real friends, except for her rescue dog, Kepler, who listened to her rants about string theory without ever rolling his eyes. What kept Lucy going was her nighttime ritual. Every night, when the world was quiet, she would lie on her bed, stare at the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, and whisper to herself. Somewhere out there, someone gets it. She didn't know who. A future friend? A distant professor? An alien on another planet? Or maybe, just maybe, Elon Musk. Lucy idolized him. Not in the posters on the wall kind of way. But in the "this man sees farther than anyone else on Earth" kind of way. She watched his rocket launches live, paused YouTube videos to copy formulas he scribbled on whiteboards, and once tried to email him a question about orbital velocity. The email bounced. She didn't care about his fame. She cared about his curiosity. That restless, stubborn, sometimes chaotic mind that kept asking, what if? In Lucy's world, what if, was the most powerful question you could ask. But while her mind soared, reality sometimes dragged her down. Bills piled up. Claire worked double shifts at the hospital and still struggled to keep the lights on. The internet connection went out often, and Lucy had to bike to the library just to download scientific journals. There were nights Claire came home exhausted, only to find Lucy asleep at the table, face in a textbook, a half-eaten PB&J next to her. Claire would just stand there, watching her daughter, a mix of worry and wonder in her eyes. She's not just smart, Claire once told Mrs. Carter during a parent-teacher conference. She's alone in how smart she is. So when the video went viral, when people online started whispering about the girl genius from Iowa, Claire wasn't surprised. She was scared. Because being seen came with a price. Especially for someone like Lucy. That night, after Elon's office had called and the initial shock wore off, Claire sat Lucy down at their warm kitchen table. "Sweetheart," she began gently, "do you know who Elon Musk is?" Lucy's eyes widened. Yeah. Claire laughed. "Well, apparently he knows who you are." Lucy dropped the screwdriver she was holding. "He wants to meet you. In person. In Texas. They're sending a plane." "A plane?" "Yep." Lucy blinked. "Like, an actual airplane?" Claire nodded. "Is it electric?" "No idea." Lucy paused. Then smiled. "Okay, that's cool." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Just, cool." Lucy grinned. "Okay, super cool." As Lucy lay in bed that night, her mind raced. What would she say? What would he ask? Would he take her seriously? Could she finally find someone who didn't just listen, but understood? She stared at the stars on her ceiling and whispered like always. Somewhere out there, someone gets it. And for the first time ever, she believed it might be true. It started with a paperclip. Well, technically, a paperclip, 2 magnets, a spool of copper wire, an old cassette player motor, and a lot of electrical tape. But it was the paperclip that got stuck in Kepler's fur that made Lucy smile and say, "Hey, that's not supposed to happen." That was the moment. The moment the whole thing clicked. She had been trying to create a low-power propulsion loop, a sort of magnetic field engine powered by ambient electromagnetism in the environment. It was the kind of concept most engineers would scoff at and call science fiction. But Lucy had been thinking about it for months, sketching designs in the margins of her spelling homework. That morning, she skipped her usual Pop-Tarts, ran outside to the shed in socks, and didn't stop working until sunset. Inside her lab shed, she repurposed a cardboard shoebox for the base, cut out copper rings from an old desk fan, and wired the whole thing to a battery pack she'd recharged using solar cells from a broken calculator. On top, she placed her test subject, a paper airplane she had folded perfectly, wings adjusted with millimeter precision. The idea was simple: create a localized loop of force strong enough to keep the plane in the air, indefinitely. She turned it on. It buzzed like a sad mosquito. The coil heated. The magnetic rings shimmered faintly. And then, the plane lifted. Hovered. Turned slowly. Didn't fall. For 10 full minutes. Mrs. Carter, Lucy's science teacher, happened to be visiting to drop off a box of old National Geographics. She stood at the door to the shed, watching, jaw open. "Lucy," she whispered, "what is this?" Lucy didn't even look up. "I call it the LMP-1. LM, what? Low Field Magnetic Propulsion. Version 1. Does it fly?" "It doesn't fly," Lucy said, still tweaking a wire, "it balances. Uses ambient magnetic resonance and some self-contained current. The plane's just decoration, but it works." Mrs. Carter stared at the setup. "This needs to be seen," she said. Lucy wasn't so sure. She was used to not being believed. Sharing her ideas usually meant more teasing. More snickers. More people calling her Robo-Girl. But Mrs. Carter was different. She had always encouraged Lucy. Always said her brain was a gift, not a glitch. So when Mrs. Carter asked, "Do you mind if I record this?" Lucy just nodded and kept adjusting the magnets. The video was 3 minutes long. No narration. Just Lucy explaining her theory, her device, her goals. And the airplane, hovering, impossibly, circling in perfect stillness. Mrs. Carter posted the video later that night on Reddit with a simple caption. "One of my 5th graders might be a genius. Am I crazy, or did she just build a passive propulsion system using magnetic fields?" She expected maybe a few comments. Maybe a physics major correcting her. Maybe silence. What she got was 87,000 upvotes in 24 hours. The video spread like wildfire. First to the r/science and r/futurology subreddits. Then to YouTube. Then to X, formerly Twitter, where astrophysicists, engineers, conspiracy theorists, and even astronauts started weighing in. Some claimed it was a hoax. Some accused it of being deepfake CGI. But others, serious people, really looked. One MIT professor commented, "The math doesn't just check out. It innovates on concepts most of us wouldn't attempt at 10x her age." A Tesla engineer tweeted, "Is this the magnetic lift tech we've been hunting for? If this is real, we've got work to do." At first, Lucy didn't even know it had gone viral. She was grounded. Claire had found the microwave disassembled in the laundry room again and put a 2-day ban on any science that involves tools. When Mrs. Carter called and said, "Lucy, I think the whole world's about to know your name," Lucy replied, "Is that a good thing?" By the time she got her internet privileges back, Lucy searched her name and froze. Dozens of videos. Thousands of comments. Millions of views. She didn't know whether to laugh or throw up. Kepler wagged his tail as if to say, "Told you you were weird in a good way." The calls started rolling in the next morning. News stations. STEM YouTubers. Even someone claiming to be from Jimmy Kimmel Live. Claire ignored most of them. But then came the email. From, assistant@spacex.com. Subject, private invitation from Elon Musk. Body, please confirm a direct line. Mr. Musk would like to speak with Lucy Taylor regarding her recent experiment. Claire read it 5 times. She called Mrs. Carter. "Is this real?" "I don't know," Mrs. Carter whispered. "But if it is, Lucy's life is about to change." That night, Claire sat on Lucy's bed, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "You know," she said gently, "sometimes being seen means people will want things from you. Attention. Time. Ideas. Are you ready for that?" Lucy looked up at the stars on her ceiling, glowing faintly in the dark. "I just want to ask him about Mars," she said. "Is that okay?" Claire kissed her forehead. "It's more than okay, baby." Across the country, Elon Musk was watching the video again in his office, rewinding to the part where Lucy explained her energy loop with a napkin sketch. He paused it. Zoomed in. Then smiled. "She's not imitating," he said aloud. "She's inventing." And then, turning to his assistant. "Book the jet. We're flying her in." Elon Musk wasn't easily impressed. He'd launched rockets into orbit, created electric cars that could outpace Ferraris, developed brain-chip interfaces, and once tweeted about selling all his homes just because he felt like it. The man had seen a lot. But there was something about the video of Lucy Taylor that stuck with him. It wasn't just the experiment. It wasn't the magnetic propulsion, though, yes, that was groundbreaking, especially from a 10-year-old with access to, basically, kitchen junk. It was the way she explained it. No arrogance. No showmanship. Just pure, focused curiosity. Like the science wasn't for anyone else's approval, it was simply the way she made sense of the world. That was the part that got to him. That's what genius really looked like. The more Elon learned about Lucy, the more intrigued he became. She wasn't part of any advanced gifted program. No private tutors. No tech nerd parents guiding her through complex math. Just a single mom working hospital shifts and a kid who apparently taught herself vector calculus before she hit middle school. She didn't ask to be famous. She didn't even ask to be noticed. She just wanted to know more. That reminded Elon of, well, himself. So, he called a meeting. Clear my afternoon, he told his assistant. And get me her school. I want to talk to her teacher. Lucy's teacher. Yes. You're meeting with 2 venture capital firms this afternoon about the Mars terraforming initiative. Elon paused. I don't care. Cancel it? No. Postpone it. Mars can wait. This girl can't. 30 minutes later, he was on a video call with Mrs. Carter, the same science teacher who had posted the now viral Reddit clip. Her background was a cluttered classroom with a faded periodic table of elements poster and a globe missing Antarctica. Mr. Musk, she said, eyes wide. This is surreal. I saw Lucy's video, Elon said, jumping straight in. And I've read the whiteboard notes you posted in the follow-up thread. She's not just repeating things she's read. She's innovating. I know, Mrs. Carter said, a smile tugging at her lips. I've been telling people that for years. She's already outthinking people in my R&D teams, Elon continued. I want to meet her. In person. Not in 6 months. This week. Back in Iowa, Lucy was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom, flipping through a used physics textbook she had bought for $2 at a garage sale. It was missing the last 3 chapters, but she didn't mind. She liked filling in the blanks. Claire knocked once, then opened the door. She was holding her phone like it was radioactive. Lucy, she said cautiously, someone wants to talk to you. Lucy didn't look up. Can it wait? I'm trying to figure out how charged particles react in solar winds. Claire blinked. It's Elon Musk. Lucy's head snapped up so fast she nearly got whiplash. What? He's on a Zoom call right now. With your teacher. He wants to talk to you. Lucy shot up and scrambled toward the living room like she was on fire. The screen flickered. There he was. Elon Musk. Real. Live. Sitting in a hoodie with some rocket schematics in the background and a half-drunk can of Diet Coke on the desk. Lucy froze. He looked at her and smiled. You must be Lucy Taylor. She gave a small wave, suddenly very aware that her hair was a mess and she was still wearing pajama pants with Saturns on them. Hi, she mumbled. I saw your video, Elon said. It's impressive. Lucy didn't know what to say. Thanks, she managed. I didn't think it would go that far. Well, it did, he said. And now I have a question for you. She leaned in instinctively. Do you want to come to Texas and help us build something no one else on Earth has even dreamed of yet? Claire gasped softly behind the camera. Lucy blinked. Then smiled. Yeah, she said. I do. 3 days later, a black SUV arrived outside their home. The neighbors peeked through their curtains as 2 men in suits stepped out, holding a clipboard and wearing SpaceX lanyards. Claire, still in her nurse scrubs, looked completely overwhelmed. Lucy stood beside her with a backpack full of sketch pads, wires, and her favorite wrench. Are you sure about this? Claire asked her. Lucy nodded. It's just science, Mom. Claire pulled her into a hug. No, it's more than that. You're walking into something big, Lucy. I know, Lucy whispered. I'm ready. The drive to the airport felt like a dream. At the private hangar, Lucy and Claire boarded a jet marked with a sleek SpaceX logo. Inside, everything was white leather, chrome fixtures, and flat screens showing live weather data. Claire clutched the armrest the whole way. Lucy. She pressed her face to the window and whispered calculations to herself at 35,000 feet. By the time they landed in Texas, the sun was setting. The heat shimmered off the tarmac as they pulled up to Starbase, SpaceX's most advanced facility, where rockets were born and the future was hand-assembled in metal and fire. And waiting at the hangar was Elon himself. He looked at Lucy and smiled. You ready to blow a few minds? Lucy adjusted her backpack. I already did, she said. Let's do more. The moment Lucy stepped off the jet, the air hit her like a furnace. Hot. Dry. Electric. She had never been this far from Iowa, never even seen the ocean, let alone the inside of a private hangar. Yet here she was, standing on a runway in Boca Chica, Texas, with Elon Musk himself waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He looked casual. Hoodie. Sneakers. Aviators that hit his eyes but couldn't mask the grin stretching across his face as Lucy descended the steps with her backpack slung over one shoulder like it held the answers to the universe. Claire followed close behind, a little more hesitant, glancing nervously at the entourage surrounding them. You must be Lucy, Elon said, extending a hand. Lucy stared for a half-second, then shook it. Nice to meet you, she said, voice clear but cautious. No offense, Elon said, but I was hoping you'd be weirder. Lucy blinked, then smirked. Give it 5 minutes. He laughed. I like you already. Starbase looked like a sci-fi movie come to life. Massive silver rockets loomed in the background, their cylindrical bodies gleaming in the sun. Robotic arms shifted silently along assembly lines. Engineers in black SpaceX jackets walked briskly between hangars. Somewhere nearby, something hissed and steamed like a dragon exhaling. Lucy didn't blink once. Her eyes scanned everything, every wire, every pipe, every screen. This is, she whispered, unreal. Elon nodded beside her. This is where crazy ideas become slightly less crazy. He motioned to a sleek electric cart parked nearby. Hop in. You're gonna want to see the whole thing. As the cart cruised through the facility, Elon narrated like a tour guide, only his tour included phrases like, we crashed that one into the ocean, and, this is where we're prototyping Martian soil farming with algae. Claire gripped the seat beside Lucy, quietly trying to process the fact that her daughter was sitting next to the man who casually dropped lines like, once we get to Europa. But Lucy? She was thriving. She asked questions. Smart ones. Deep ones. About plasma ion flow. About lift ratios. About fuel stabilization in extreme temperatures. Elon didn't dumb anything down for her. He answered like she was a colleague. Because, in his eyes, she was. They arrived at a hangar labeled Experimental Division. Elon stopped the cart, turned to Lucy, and said, this is where it gets fun. Inside was a sprawling lab filled with half-built machines, 3D printers the size of small trucks, and a whiteboard so crammed with equations it looked like someone had gone mad with a marker. This is the sandbox, he said. The place we test the ideas nobody's supposed to try yet. He motioned toward a table near the back. On it sat a familiar object. Her experiment. The magnetic propulsion loop. Reassembled from her video, only cleaner, polished, improved. Lucy's jaw dropped. You built it? No, Elon said. You did. We just copied what we saw and reverse engineered it. And it worked. Mostly. He turned to her, eyes serious now. Lucy, you created a field-stabilized loop that could, with enough power and refinement, disrupt how we think about short-range propulsion. This isn't a science fair. This is a game changer. Lucy didn't speak. She couldn't. For once, her brain was quiet. Just long enough for one thought to settle in. I belong here. Later, they sat in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the launch pad. Claire sipped a bottle of water, trying not to show how overwhelmed she felt. Elon sat across from them, typing rapidly on a tablet between questions. So here's the pitch, he said at last. Lucy joins us here for the summer. A special program. Custom built. She'll work alongside our research teams, have access to labs, mentors, the whole thing. We'll handle housing, flights, food, whatever you need. Claire blinked. Wait, you're offering her a job? Not officially, Elon said, smiling. Let's call it an internship. A very, very advanced one. Claire looked at Lucy. Lucy's eyes were sparkling. But she wasn't jumping up and down or screaming like a normal kid would. She was just sitting very, very still. Thinking. Then she turned to her mom. I want to do it. Claire hesitated. It's a big step, Lucy. I know. You're 10. I'm ready. Claire studied her daughter. She had always known Lucy was different. Not just smart, driven. Built like a question mark with rocket fuel. This wasn't about being famous or even proving something. This was about finally being somewhere her mind had room to run. Claire nodded slowly. Then we're in. Elon grinned. Good, he said. Because we already cleared out a desk for her. That night, in a sleek on-site apartment overlooking the test field, Lucy lay in bed staring at the ceiling. This time, it wasn't glowing stars above her, it was real. Out there, just beyond the glass, a prototype rocket lit up the sky as engineers ran tests. Kepler lay curled at the foot of the bed, freshly flown in thanks to Elon's private team of handlers who insisted, a mind needs its emotional support unit. Lucy whispered softly. Somewhere out there. I was meant for this. Lucy, this is Alan. He helped design the Falcon heavy thruster systems. Alan, meet Lucy Taylor, our 10-year-old Chaos engine. Alan, a lanky guy in his 30s with oil-smudged hands and a coffee addiction written all over his face, looked at Lucy with a raised eyebrow. You're the one who built the magnetic loop with a paperclip and a broken fan. Lucy shrugged. I also used a cassette motor. Alan laughed. Well, I've got a $4 million lab and can't get half the stability you did. She smiled. Maybe you're overthinking it. Elon, standing nearby with arms crossed, grinned. Told you. They were in Hangar 9, the most secure test bay at Starbase. You had to badge in twice, go through a biometric scan, and sign a liability waiver just to walk past the first security door. This wasn't for press events or tourists. This was for crazy stuff. On the main platform sat a scaled-up prototype of Lucy's propulsion design, dubbed LMP-X1, now retooled with graphene coils, programmable field oscillators, and a power source strong enough to light up half a city block. Lucy walked around it in a slow circle, fingertips grazing the frame. It's not exactly mine anymore, she said softly. Alan looked over. What do you mean? It's better, she said. But, it's also not messy. The mess was part of how I thought. Alan scratched his head. Well, welcome to Team Science. We clean up the chaos just enough so it doesn't explode. Lucy smirked. Where's the fun in that? They spent the next 4 hours running diagnostics. Lucy learned how to read voltmeters, thermal monitors, and field resonance scans in real time. She asked questions the engineers didn't expect. She challenged their math. Sometimes she was wrong, but every time she was close, the room got quiet. By the end of the day, she wasn't just the kid who built the loop. She was part of the team. At 7:46 p.m., the bay was sealed. Test number 001 was greenlit. The goal was simple: lift the LMP-X1 2 feet off the ground and maintain hover for 60 seconds using only its magnetic propulsion system. No external thrust. No fans. No trick wires. If it worked, it would be the first time an object of that weight hovered using that kind of energy flow, ever. Lucy stood behind the reinforced glass wall next to Elon, Alan, and a dozen engineers and interns who were now pretending not to be emotionally invested. Elon turned to her. Moment of truth. You ready? Lucy nodded. Let's light it up. The floor lights dimmed. A low hum filled the chamber, like the sound of a thunderstorm too far away to feel but too close to ignore. LMP-X1 shuddered. The copper coils began to glow, not bright, but alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Alan counted down, 10, 9, 8. Lucy held her breath. 3, 2, 1. The platform underneath the device vibrated. A metallic whine echoed through the room. Then it lifted. Only 6 inches. But it lifted. No external support. No combustion. Just Lucy's theory, scaled, structured, and brought to life. For 6 glorious seconds, the LMP-X1 hovered, balanced by magnetic fields alone. Then, bang, a capacitor burst. Smoke filled the test chamber. The lights flickered and alarms blared. Engineers rushed in as the emergency suppression system kicked on, flooding the area in fire-retardant mist. Through it all, Lucy stood motionless. Not scared. Not upset. Just thinking. After the smoke cleared and the data was backed up, the team gathered in the observation room. Elon sat on the edge of a steel table, elbows on knees, smiling. That, he said, was perfect. Alan coughed. We blew a coil. It nearly fried the stabilizer array. Yeah, Elon nodded. But it worked. He turned to Lucy. How do you feel? She bit her lip, thinking. Then said, that wasn't the final version. Everyone chuckled. Elon leaned closer. Then tell me what is. Back in her apartment that night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She replayed the test over and over in her head. Not the success. The failure. The little stutter in the pulse frequency. The way the hover lost symmetry just before the burnout. She sat up, grabbed her notebook, and began sketching. Page after page. Ideas. Fixes. New patterns. She didn't even notice the sun rising. Claire knocked on the door around 7 a.m., already dressed in scrubs for her part-time volunteer gig at the SpaceX Med Clinic. You didn't sleep, did you? Nope, Lucy said, pencil in her teeth. Everything okay? Lucy held up the notebook. I'm building the next version, she said, eyes blazing. It's not about making it work. It's about making it last. Claire walked in, kissed the top of her head. That's my girl. Later that day, Elon called a private meeting. Lucy, Claire, and a handful of senior engineers sat around a table as he clicked through images on a screen. I want to expand this, he said. I want Lucy's design fast-tracked into a new test series. Full scale. Alan raised an eyebrow. You're talking integration. I'm talking flight tests by end of quarter. Claire sat up. Hold on, flight. As in, people on it? No, Elon said. Not yet. But if this tech stabilizes, we could be looking at a propulsion revolution. Electric lift. Zero-fuel hovercraft. Low-atmosphere drones that never need landing gear. Mars-ready tech. He looked at Lucy. You want to keep going? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The first article hit just before noon. Published on a fringe tech blog known more for crypto conspiracies than real science, it included grainy, zoomed-in photos of Lucy walking beside Elon at Starbase. By 3 p.m., it had over 400,000 shares. By 6 p.m., CNN, Fox News, and even TMZ were knocking on the door. Claire's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local reporters. Morning shows. Someone from Good Morning America offered to fly them to New York, first class, of course, for an exclusive. I said no, Claire told Lucy, scrolling through a flood of voicemails, but I don't know how long we can keep you out of it. Lucy didn't answer right away. She was staring at her computer screen, watching the playback of the LMP-X1's first test. Frame by frame. Looking for the moment where everything had gone off balance. Do I have to do interviews? She asked finally. Claire sighed. Not if you don't want to. But honey, you're not invisible anymore. Lucy frowned. I liked being invisible. Back at SpaceX, the tone had shifted. Security around Lucy's quarters was doubled. Elon ordered all her lab time moved to a classified schedule, only cleared staff were allowed to see her blueprints now. This was inevitable, he told Claire. You can't change the world in secret forever. But she's 10, Elon, Claire snapped. She's not a headline. She's a kid with a wrench and a notebook. And she's building something no adult has ever pulled off. That makes her a target. And sure enough, the backlash followed the buzz. On tech forums, commenters raged. Is this even ethical? A child doing R&D? Why is Musk exploiting a minor for PR? How do we even know she's the one building it? Some accused Elon of staging it all. Others accused Lucy of being a plant, an actress, a marketing gimmick, a deepfake. And then came the worst one. A YouTuber with 2 million subscribers posted a video titled, "Is this girl a genius, or just a very polished hoax?" He went line by line, debunking Lucy's experiment with snarky voiceovers and slow-motion clips of her work. She doesn't even have a degree, he mocked. She's a child. Lucy watched it that night. The whole thing. Then shut her laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, in the dark, the Starbase launch pad glowed under halogen lights. A new rocket stood in place, humming quietly, waiting for tomorrow's trial run. Kepler, her dog, pressed his head to her knee. Why are people like that? Lucy whispered. Claire stood behind her. Because they don't understand what they're looking at. I didn't ask to be famous, Lucy said. I just wanted to build something real. I know, baby. Lucy looked up. I still do. The next morning, Elon called her into his office. There were no windows. Just 4 monitors, 2 half-drunk energy drinks, and a whiteboard covered in rough Martian terrain maps. He slid a tablet toward her. On it was a blank email draft. To the world, he said. Your words. Not mine. Lucy stared at the screen. I don't know what to say. Elon shrugged. Then say what you needed to hear at your lowest point. Say it like you're talking to the version of yourself that almost gave up. She sat down. Took a breath. And started typing. Hi. I'm Lucy. I'm 10. I like physics, dogs, and old machines. I didn't ask to go viral. I just made something because I was curious. Because science makes me feel alive when the rest of the world feels loud and confusing. I didn't expect Elon Musk to call me. Or to end up in Texas. Or to be accused of being fake. But I'm not fake. I'm just a kid with questions. And sometimes, asking the right questions can be louder than shouting. So yeah, I'm building something. It might not change the world yet. But it changed mine. She paused. Then added. If you've ever felt small or ignored because you think differently, just know, you're not broken. You're building. She clicked send. The letter exploded online. It was posted on Reddit, Twitter, and every major news site within hours. People cried reading it. Teachers printed it out and taped it to classroom walls. Parents sent messages saying their own kids felt seen, finally. Lucy wasn't just a headline now. She was real. And more than that. She was leading. That evening, as Elon walked her back to the lab, he asked, "Still want to keep going?" Lucy looked up at him, a little older now than the day before. "I was never going to stop," she said. He nodded. Then smiled. "Good. Because your next test. It's not just a hover anymore. It's flight." The days after Lucy's letter were a whirlwind. Every major news outlet in the world had picked up on the story. Online forums were filled with memes, jokes, and debates. Some embraced the child genius, others still questioned the authenticity of her work. But no one could deny the truth of what was happening. Lucy Taylor had become a symbol of possibility. Elon's phone rang off the hook, calls from world leaders, venture capitalists, even a few Hollywood directors who wanted to turn her story into a movie. But through it all, Elon kept his focus on the one thing that mattered, the next test. By day 4, Lucy had her hands full. Between late-night engineering sessions and interviews, she barely had time to breathe. Claire had turned into a full-time bodyguard, no joke, standing outside the lab doors to field the press, keeping the space a little bit calmer. Lucy had learned how to block out the noise, but even she couldn't help but be affected by the pressure of the world watching. One afternoon, as they were walking toward the testing bay, she turned to Elon, her brows furrowed. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. It's all moving too fast." Elon glanced at her, giving her a moment to absorb the weight of what she said. "Lucy, we've already crossed the point of no return. You wanted to change the world. Now the world's ready to see it. If you're feeling pressure, it means you're doing something that matters. But if you need to take a step back, we can do that too. I'm not in a rush." She shook her head, feeling the intensity of his words sink in. "No. I'm not backing down. But I want it to be my idea, not just something people talk about because of me." Elon smiled. "It already is. You're building something no one thought possible, and you're doing it your way. That's what matters." That evening, the lab was buzzing with anticipation. The team had spent the past several weeks testing and retooling Lucy's propulsion system. They'd perfected the LMP-X1's magnetic fields, recalibrated the resonance patterns, and added new layers of safety protocols. But today, they were taking it one step further. Today, they were going to make the LMP-X1 fly. Lucy stood in front of the new prototype, a much larger, more refined version of the hovercraft from their earlier test. This one had wings. And not just any wings. Designed for ultra-lightweight and aerodynamic efficiency, the wings were made of the same graphene composite material used in the Falcon rockets. They were flexible yet strong, capable of adapting to the shift in the magnetic fields that would allow the LMP-X1 to fly, not just hover. It was the future of flight, and it was about to unfold before their eyes. Elon stood beside her, watching her inspect the machine. "Ready?" Lucy hesitated, just for a second. "Are you?" He grinned. "Let's see if you were right about this." Inside the control room, the team was preparing to activate the prototype. They ran through checklists, diagnostics, and backup systems. They triple-checked everything. This wasn't just about pushing the limits of physics anymore. They were venturing into the unknown. Lucy stood in front of the terminal, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "This is it," she whispered. She entered the final command. Outside, the thrusters hummed to life. The LMP-X1 lifted off the ground. It hovered for a full 10 seconds, floating effortlessly above the test platform. But then, with a flicker in the display and a slight adjustment in the resonance frequency, the craft leaned into the wind. The wings flared. It was flying. The crowd inside the control room gasped, some even holding their breath as the LMP-X1 ascended to a height of 15 feet. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't look away. She kept her focus. She had designed this. It was her dream becoming reality. Then, something unexpected happened. The magnetic fields began to shift slightly. It was subtle at first, like a wobble in the air. But soon the imbalance grew. "Elon, it's not stabilizing properly," Lucy shouted, her fingers flying across the console. Elon, who'd been watching with awe, now stood alert. "Shut it down," he yelled. The team scrambled to initiate the emergency protocol, but the imbalance continued. The LMP-X1 swerved to the left, its wings flapping wildly as the field disrupted the lift. "Lucy, hit the shutdown sequence, now." Alan's voice cracked through the comms. But Lucy hesitated. The craft was spiraling, but it wasn't a complete failure. She had one chance left. She could feel the system in her gut, just one more adjustment, one more fine-tune. She entered the override sequence, hands shaking, but her mind was clear. And then, in a sudden surge of clarity, the magnetic fields corrected themselves. The wings snapped back into alignment. The LMP-X1 steadied. It floated, the pressure of the unstable energy receding. The room went dead silent. For a long, glorious moment, the LMP-X1 soared effortlessly above the ground, its wings spread wide like a bird taking its first flight. The hum of the magnetic engines resonated in perfect harmony with the rest of the system. The craft had stabilized. When Lucy spoke again, her voice was soft but filled with awe. "It worked." "It did," Elon agreed, a smile creeping onto his face. "You did it." The craft hovered above them for several more minutes before Lucy signaled for a controlled landing. The final test wasn't just about flight. It was about safety, control, and scalability. They needed to be sure that the technology could evolve into something more, something that could fly for hours, not just minutes. When the LMP-X1 finally touched down, the room erupted into applause. Engineers and technicians were laughing, shouting, and exchanging high fives. But for Lucy, there was only one thing on her mind. The idea of more. That night, as they celebrated, Elon walked up to Lucy. "You're going to make history with this. But you know, this is just the beginning." Lucy nodded, her eyes never leaving the flight model on the platform. "I'm just getting started." The news broke the next morning like an avalanche. Headlines everywhere. Front-page stories. From Forbes to the New York Times, tech blogs to morning talk shows, the world had finally realized what had just happened. It wasn't just a new invention. It was a paradigm shift. A disruption. SpaceX's Starbase had become the epicenter of a revolution that no one could have predicted. But for Lucy, it felt different than she imagined. She had spent years dreaming of making something that would change the world. But now that it was happening, the sheer weight of it all had hit her hard. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk looking at the piles of congratulatory messages, Claire came in and sat next to her. "Looks like the world's waking up," Claire said softly, glancing at the screen. "But you're okay, right?" Lucy didn't answer right away. She was staring at the text on her phone. Elon had sent her a simple message: "You've changed everything. Now, don't stop." "I don't know if I can keep up with all this," Lucy admitted. Claire nodded. "The pressure's going to be intense, but you've got this. You built something that could change the course of aviation, Lucy. You don't need to do it alone. We're here." Lucy smiled weakly, but she wasn't convinced. The phone rang. It was Elon. "Lucy, we need to talk," he said, his tone unusually serious. "About what?" she asked, her pulse quickening. "The flight's just the start. We're getting calls from every major company. Aerospace giants, venture capitalists. Even the military wants a piece of the tech. You've just turned this into a race. And the whole world is watching us now. But if we're going to move forward, we have to make some big decisions. Lucy bit her lip. I wasn't planning on all this. I just wanted to build something that worked. Not start a war over it. The craft hovered above them for several more minutes before Lucy signaled for a controlled landing. The final test wasn't just about flight. It was about safety, control, and scalability. They needed to be sure that the technology could evolve into something more, something that could fly for hours, not just minutes. When the LMP-X1 finally touched down, the room erupted into applause. Engineers and technicians were laughing, shouting, and exchanging high fives. But for Lucy, there was only one thing on her mind. The idea of more. That night, as they celebrated, Elon walked up to Lucy. You're going to make history with this. But you know, this is just the beginning. Lucy nodded, her eyes never leaving the flight model on the platform. I'm just getting started. The news broke the next morning like an avalanche. Headlines everywhere. Front page stories. From Forbes to the New York Times, tech blogs to morning talk shows, the world had finally realized what had just happened. It wasn't just a new invention. It was a paradigm shift. A disruption. SpaceX's Starbase had become the epicenter of a revolution that no one could have predicted. But for Lucy, it felt different than she imagined. She had spent years dreaming of making something that would change the world. But now that it was happening, the sheer weight of it all had hit her hard. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk looking at the piles of congratulatory messages, Claire came in and sat next to her. Looks like the world's waking up, Claire said softly, glancing at the screen. But you're okay, right? Lucy didn't answer right away. She was staring at the text on her phone. Elon had sent her a simple message, you've changed everything. Now, don't stop. I don't know if I can keep up with all this, Lucy admitted. Claire nodded. The pressure's going to be intense, but you've got this. You built something that could change the course of aviation, Lucy. You don't need to do it alone. We're here. Lucy smiled weakly, but she wasn't convinced. The phone rang. It was Elon. Lucy, we need to talk, he said, his tone unusually serious. About what? She asked, her pulse quickening. The flight's just the start. We're getting calls from every major company. Aerospace giants, venture capitalists. Even the military wants a piece of the tech. You've just turned this into a race. And the whole world is watching us now. But if we're going to move forward, we have to make some big decisions. Lucy bit her lip. I wasn't planning on all this. I just wanted to build something that worked. Not start a war over it. She paused, her eyes scanning the sea of cameras and eager faces. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. I know the world's full of people who'll try to take credit for this. Who will tell you they were the ones who invented it. But this wasn't a team effort. This wasn't something I was taught in a textbook. This was something I did on my own, because I wanted to. Because I asked the questions no one else was brave enough to ask. Lucy smiled slightly. This is our future. It's not a toy, and it's not just an invention. It's a new way to think about the world. A way to move forward, without the limitations of the past. She turned to Elon, who was watching her intently. And we're going to make sure everyone has a chance to benefit from it, she said, her voice strong and clear. But we'll do it the right way. The world exploded with reactions. The first wave of investment flooded in, and major aerospace companies began negotiating with SpaceX for licensing deals. Governments and military organizations requested access to the technology, but Elon was firm on his stance. This is about the future of humanity, he said in interviews. We're not giving this tech to the highest bidder. We're giving it to those who can use it for the right reasons. As the press conference ended, and the world moved to digest the implications of what had just been said, Lucy stood next to Elon, her hand still gripping the mic. For a moment, it felt like nothing could stop them. The world was about to take off, with her. It was inevitable. As soon as the world saw what Lucy Taylor had done, the competition began. It wasn't just the aerospace giants or the governments that were watching, there were startups, rogue inventors, and even underground engineering groups all vying to replicate her success. But it wasn't just about duplicating her work, it was about controlling the future. The calls started coming in from everywhere. Early morning phone calls from venture capitalists who wanted to partner with her. Emails from international conglomerates desperate for a piece of the LMP X1. And then, the unofficial inquiries, whispers from rival engineers who believed they could do it better, faster, cheaper. SpaceX's main competitors, especially Blue Origin and Boeing, had already started to shift their focus to developing similar technologies. They had the resources, the expertise, and the infrastructure. But they didn't have Lucy. And that was their problem. In the weeks following the press conference, SpaceX was inundated with requests for demonstrations. In her own quiet, determined way, Lucy had become the most sought-after mind in the world of aviation and technology. She spent the majority of her time locked in the lab with Elon and the team, refining her designs, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But each day brought a new surprise. Competitors, especially a new startup called Aerodynamics, announced they had a similar technology, one they claimed was even more efficient than Lucy's design. They were fast-tracking their prototype, and they weren't afraid to challenge her directly. Aerodynamics was run by an ambitious 30-year-old tech mogul named Victor Graves, who'd already made a name for himself with several successful AI startups. He had no real aerospace experience, but he had the resources and a powerful network of investors behind him. His team had been hard at work developing a competing version of Lucy's flight system, one that promised to be cheaper, quicker to manufacture, and more energy efficient. But what Victor lacked was heart. Lucy didn't just design a machine. She redefined what flight could be, understanding the principles behind it on a deeper, more intuitive level. It wasn't just about achieving flight, it was about transforming the way humanity interacted with the world. Victor's version was sleek, impressive, but it lacked the raw creativity that had fueled Lucy's innovation. And Lucy knew it. The first time Lucy saw the Aerodynamics prototype in person, she couldn't help but feel a sense of tension in the air. It was presented at an international technology fair, one of those massive, glitzy events where everyone came to show off their next big thing. Lucy, of course, had been invited to present the LMP X1 as part of SpaceX's showcase, but her presence there wasn't just as a participant, it was as a target. Victor was standing next to his prototype, a silver craft that seemed to hum with an impressive energy. It was a compact design, smaller and sleeker than Lucy's, but undeniably impressive. The media flocked to him, asking questions and recording every word. "We're creating the future of flight, just like the world has seen. But we're doing it better, faster, and more efficiently," Victor said, a smirk on his face as he watched the crowds gather. Lucy stood on the opposite side of the convention hall with Elon, watching the show unfold. Elon's eyes narrowed. "He's good. But he doesn't have what you have. You're the one with the vision. He's just following the blueprint." Lucy didn't respond right away. She was thinking, processing, weighing her next move. "I know. But it's not just about him. It's the whole system. Everyone's going to be after this. And I don't know if SpaceX can compete with all of them." Elon placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're not here to compete, Lucy. We're here to lead. You built something that can change the world, and that's why they're all chasing you. But don't let the noise distract you. Keep your eyes on the prize." The conference was more than just an exhibition, it was a battlefield. And the competitors weren't just showing their prototypes. They were launching campaigns to sway public opinion, gathering influence to pressure governments into granting them exclusive rights to the technology. Aerodynamics' pitch was simple: affordable flight for all. They promised their design could revolutionize personal transportation, offering a much cheaper alternative to the LMP X1, which still had a high price tag. The media ate it up. Headlines proclaimed, "Aerodynamics to revolutionize aviation, is SpaceX falling behind?" At first, Lucy didn't react. She continued to work, focusing on her designs, perfecting the systems. But it was hard to ignore the constant barrage of stories casting doubt on her work. Was her technology really the best? Were other companies outpacing her? Elon noticed the change in Lucy. She wasn't her usual confident self anymore. The competition was starting to take its toll. One evening, after a long day in the lab, Elon sat down across from Lucy, watching her examine the new schematics for the next test. "You're not just fighting for a product, Lucy," he said. "You're fighting for the future. And that's why you can't let anyone tell you what that looks like. You get to decide." Lucy didn't look up. "I don't know if I can keep going at this pace." "They're right, Aerodynamics has something that's cheaper. What if we can't match that?" Elon leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Lucy, it's not about who's cheapest. It's about who's the best. You didn't just design a new way to fly, you invented a whole new way to think about how people interact with the world. You can't let someone else define that for you." The next day, Lucy made a decision. Instead of competing on their terms, she was going to take her tech to a different level. She called a meeting with Elon and the team. "I don't want to just build a machine anymore," she said, her voice firm. "I want to build a movement. I want to show the world what this technology can do, not just for billionaires, but for everyone." She turned to the team, determination in her eyes. "It's not about flying cars or luxury transportation. It's about breaking barriers, making something accessible. I'm going to prove that we can change the world, and we'll do it our way." And just like that, the game changed. The competition was on. But Lucy Taylor wasn't just playing for the win, she was playing for the future. The world was watching. The stakes were higher than ever. But Lucy had a secret weapon: she wasn't playing by their rules. She was rewriting them. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Lucy hadn't slept in 3 days. The whiteboard in front of her was covered with equations, ideas, sketches of designs, and notes, all frantically scribbled in a desperate attempt to piece together the next great leap in aviation. SpaceX's labs had turned into a war room. Every engineer, every designer, every tech specialist was working around the clock, their eyes red from exhaustion. They were all in, but the pressure was suffocating. And Lucy, she was at the center of it all. She wasn't just fighting for the future of her invention anymore. She was fighting for something bigger, the future of how technology would shape the world for generations to come. The competition wasn't just other companies anymore. It was the entire system, the world itself, demanding something revolutionary. And Lucy knew she had the answer. It had been a week since she had proposed her new vision to Elon and the team. Instead of following the path of the competition, she wanted to bring her vision to the world in a completely different way. If they couldn't compete on speed and cost alone, they had to redefine what it meant to change the world. She'd started drawing up a new project, one that was a hybrid of aviation, transportation, and sustainability. It was ambitious. It was risky. But she knew it could work. "We're going to release it differently," Lucy said, presenting her idea to Elon and the rest of the SpaceX team. They were seated in a conference room, the usual blueprints and prototypes spread out in front of them. But this time, there was something different in Lucy's eyes, something that hadn't been there before. "You're suggesting we take the LMP X1 and redefine it?" Elon asked, raising an eyebrow. Lucy nodded. "Not just the LMP X1. We need to make the entire system accessible, open source. There was a brief silence as the team absorbed her words. "Elon, look at what we're doing here," Lucy continued. "We've built a technology that could change the course of human transportation. But if we keep it locked behind patents and licenses, we'll never see its full potential. There are engineers, dreamers, and innovators all over the world who could take this further than we could ever imagine, but they can't if we put a price tag on it. If we release this tech to the world, freely, we'll spark a global movement." Elon leaned back in his chair, considering. "You're suggesting we open source everything? The entire framework? That's risky. It could be exploited, misused, or even replicated in ways we never intended." "I know," Lucy said, her voice steady. "But look at the bigger picture. We're not talking about a business anymore. We're talking about a revolution. This is the chance to put humanity on a new trajectory, one that prioritizes sustainability, collaboration, and shared progress over profit." Elon's face softened as he processed her words. "You're thinking bigger than anyone else in this room." "I'm in." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. The plan wasn't just bold, it was revolutionary. The next morning, SpaceX released a statement that sent shockwaves through the tech world. SpaceX to open-source revolutionary aviation technology, aiming to spark global innovation. The reaction was immediate, and it was massive. At first, the media didn't know how to process it. The tech world was buzzing with disbelief. How could SpaceX, one of the most profitable and cutting-edge companies on the planet, give away something this valuable? "Is SpaceX crazy?" one headline screamed. "Aviation's future, free for all." Investors were furious. Analysts couldn't make sense of the move. For them, the idea of releasing a game-changing technology without profiting from it seemed like business suicide. The risk was enormous. SpaceX's stock dipped slightly in the wake of the announcement, but that didn't bother Lucy. Days turned into weeks, and the world began to react in unexpected ways. Engineers from across the globe started diving into the open-source blueprints, improving them, tweaking the designs, and contributing their own ideas. It was the spark that Lucy had hoped for. Universities, research institutions, and small startups all began developing their own versions of the LMP-X1, testing the technology in ways SpaceX had never thought of. The process was messy, disorganized, but incredibly exciting. A new wave of creativity and collaboration began to emerge, with people from all walks of life coming together to push the boundaries of flight technology. But not everyone was happy. Aerodynamics, led by Victor Graves, wasted no time in launching a counterattack. They claimed that SpaceX's decision was reckless and that it would result in chaos. They argued that open-sourcing aviation technology would lead to safety risks, environmental concerns, and the complete collapse of the market. "They've made a huge mistake," Victor said during a press conference. "This isn't how you run an industry. We've spent years developing a system that is safe, efficient, and reliable. Giving it away for free? It's irresponsible." The media loved the drama. For weeks, the battle between SpaceX and aerodynamics played out in the headlines. The debate was no longer about the technology itself. It was about control. Power. Who had the right to shape the future? Lucy knew what was at stake. But she also knew something more important: this wasn't just about technology, it was about humanity. About the ability to connect, to soar above the limits of the Earth, to imagine a future where everyone had the opportunity to change the world. And she was determined to make sure that future would happen, no matter what. One evening, as Lucy sat in her office, surrounded by papers and designs, she received an unexpected call. It was from NASA. "We've been following your progress," the voice on the other end said. "And we want to discuss the future of aviation with you. We think your vision could change everything. We want to collaborate." The conversation lasted over an hour. By the time the call ended, Lucy felt like she was on the verge of something monumental. NASA wasn't just interested in using the technology, they wanted to work with SpaceX to integrate it into future space missions, long-distance travel, and even colonization efforts. It was the kind of partnership that could change everything. The breakthrough had finally come. Lucy had done it. She had sparked a global movement, a revolution that was about to spread across the world. She wasn't just a young genius anymore, she was a symbol of the future. And the world was ready to take off. It was no longer just about a new invention. It was about the world waking up. The open-source release of Lucy's technology had sent ripples across every industry. Within months, her design, the LMP-X1, had become the backbone of a global movement. Engineers, startups, and dreamers from every corner of the world were using the blueprints to create their own versions of the technology. Everyone was adapting it in their own way, combining it with solar power, electric engines, and more efficient materials. Some of the innovations were so advanced, even SpaceX's team was left in awe. For Lucy, it was a dream come true. The vision she'd fought for was no longer hers alone, it had become a global vision. But with that dream came a hard truth: the very revolution she had sparked had grown beyond her control. At first, the progress was exhilarating. New prototypes were being built every day, with companies and independent engineers constantly finding ways to improve the technology. Even students at universities were using the open-source files to design their own versions, some of which were impressively practical, designed for personal use rather than commercial transportation. There was a new energy in the air. Innovation was happening at a rate never before seen. The technology was evolving faster than anyone had anticipated. But amidst all the excitement, there was an underlying tension that Lucy couldn't ignore. The new systems being developed by independent groups weren't always built with safety in mind. Some of the designs lacked the rigorous testing that SpaceX had put into the original LMP-X1. And while the open-source movement was meant to encourage collaboration, it was also leading to fragmentation. The media, of course, had a field day. Headlines ran wild with stories of the revolution taking flight, but some were darker. Open-source aviation, a wild west of innovation. Unregulated skies, the dark side of the open-source movement. Some voices were loud, warning about the safety risks of untested designs. What happens if someone crashes a plane made with this open-source technology? One expert asked on a popular news show. What happens when a city is destroyed by an unregulated flight system? Lucy had seen the warnings, but she wasn't scared. She had always known that technology, once in the hands of the people, would evolve in ways they could never predict. That was the price of true innovation. The benefits would be massive, but there were bound to be growing pains. But then, a series of catastrophic incidents began to unfold. The first was in a small town in California. An amateur pilot, using a DIY version of the LMP-X1, attempted a flight in an untested prototype. The flight crashed shortly after takeoff, and though no one was seriously injured, the accident sent shockwaves through the tech world. The media seized on the story, and critics began to question Lucy's decision to make the technology open source. A few weeks later, a similar incident happened in Europe. A new aviation startup, one of many now trying to capitalize on the open-source technology, experienced a catastrophic system failure. This time, there were fatalities. The backlash was swift. Governments began to tighten regulations, and safety experts called for restrictions on the technology. The open-source revolution was beginning to show its darker side. Lucy couldn't ignore it any longer. The excitement that had once filled her with hope now felt tainted by doubt. She began receiving angry emails and calls from all over the world, from those who had trusted her vision, from regulators, and from grieving families. She had given the world something incredible, but she hadn't fully understood the risks. One afternoon, while Lucy was reviewing the latest developments, Elon walked into the lab, his expression serious. "Lucy, we need to talk," he said. "About the accidents?" she asked, looking up from the screen, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know. We're working on it, but..." "No, It's bigger than that, Elon interrupted. We've received some new intelligence. Some of the independent developers have begun using your technology to build weapons. Lucy froze. Weapons? Elon nodded grimly. Some of the designs are being adapted for military purposes. Drones, high-speed combat vehicles, things we never anticipated. Lucy's stomach dropped. This was never what she had wanted. She had envisioned the technology being used for peaceful, transformative purposes, but now it was being weaponized. I didn't mean for this to happen, Lucy whispered. I never thought it would go this far. You couldn't have known, Elon said, sitting down beside her. But this is where things get dangerous. You have a choice now. We need to decide how to steer this ship before it gets out of hand. The reality of what had happened began to sink in. What had started as a noble attempt to change the world was now a double-edged sword. The technology was too powerful, too disruptive. It had the potential to revolutionize transportation, yes, but it also had the potential to devastate entire systems. Lucy sat in silence, her mind racing. She had always believed that the best way to change the world was to share knowledge, to let innovation spread like wildfire. But now, the flames had gotten out of control. The revolution had spiraled into something unpredictable, and Lucy was at the center of it. Elon, I need to fix this, Lucy said, her voice firm. I know you do, Elon replied. But the question is, how? How do we reclaim control over something that's already out there? Lucy thought for a moment. Then, an idea sparked. We need to put the technology back in the hands of responsible developers. We need to create a global framework, a consortium of trusted organizations that will oversee the development of this technology, limit its use, ensure it's used for good. Elon, will create a council of innovators, scientists, and world leaders who can regulate how this technology is used. They'll guide its development, not just for profit, but for the benefit of humanity. Elon looked at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. You're going to need some heavy hitters on this council. I'll get them, Lucy said, determination surging through her. I'll find the leaders who can help us control this before it spirals out of control. That was the first step. Lucy knew it wouldn't be easy, and she didn't have all the answers yet. But she was no longer going to sit back and watch her vision be corrupted by those who didn't share her ideals. She was going to take back control, and lead the revolution on her terms. The world was watching. Lucy stood at the front of a sleek, glass-walled conference room in SpaceX headquarters, the same room where she had first pitched her vision for open-source aviation. Only this time, the stakes were higher, and the pressure heavier. The revolution she had sparked was no longer a dream, it was a reality, and it was teetering on the edge of chaos. She had spent the past few weeks assembling a council, a diverse group of global leaders, innovators, and experts, to oversee the future of the technology. The council would regulate how the open-source technology was developed, ensuring it was used responsibly, ethically, and for the good of humanity. But bringing it all together had not been easy. The first challenge was choosing the right people. The council needed a mix of technical brilliance, political wisdom, and global influence. Lucy had to ensure the council was balanced, ensuring that no single group or corporation could dominate the direction of the movement. There was Amina Al-Mansour, a leading climate scientist from the UAE who had championed sustainable technologies for decades. Her expertise in renewable energy made her an essential voice for the council, especially given the environmental implications of aviation technology. Then, there was Jorge Cruz, a former astronaut and current head of the International Space Agency. His deep understanding of both space and Earth-based technology brought a unique perspective to the table. His presence would also lend credibility to the council, making it clear that this was not just a tech venture, but a global movement with far-reaching implications. Lucy had also brought in political figures, like Sarah Kowalski, a renowned UN advisor on international regulations, and David Chang, a former U.S. senator and advocate for technological equity. Their involvement would help ensure that the Council could navigate the legal and geopolitical complexities that came with regulating such powerful technology. But perhaps the most unexpected member of the Council was Victor Graves, the CEO of Aerodynamics, the very company that had once tried to defeat SpaceX's vision. After the series of accidents and the growing controversy, Victor had reached out to Lucy, offering his support. "I want to be part of the solution," Victor had said in a rare moment of humility. "We've seen what's happened with these unregulated designs. I can help make sure that this doesn't spiral out of control." Lucy had been wary, but ultimately, she couldn't deny that Victor's industry experience and access to critical infrastructure made him a valuable ally. If anyone knew how to manage the complexities of global aviation regulation, it was him. The final piece of the puzzle was Elon Musk himself. Though he had always been a reluctant figurehead when it came to the day-to-day running of SpaceX, there was no denying that his influence was necessary. His reputation as a visionary would provide the Council with the weight it needed to gain the trust of the public and the tech world. As the Council members trickled into the conference room, Lucy took a deep breath. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she, along with these brilliant minds, would chart the course for the future of aviation. "Welcome," Lucy said, standing at the front of the room. "Thank you all for coming. This council represents the future of innovation. It's an honor to have each of you here, and I'm excited for what we can accomplish together." She paused, scanning the faces of the council members. They were all here for one reason, to make sure this revolution didn't implode. "Let's get down to business," she continued. "The first thing we need to decide is the framework for regulating the open-source technology. The goal isn't to stifle innovation, but to ensure that we're moving forward in a way that's safe, sustainable, and ethical." Amina spoke up first. "We need to establish global standards for energy use, emissions, and safety protocols. This is going to require cooperation from governments around the world. Without these regulations in place, we risk having a fragmented system that's as dangerous as it is innovative." "Exactly," Sarah Kowalski added. "There's no way we can avoid the politics of this. We're not just talking about tech here, we're talking about people's lives, about international security. This council will need to be recognized by every major government to ensure that we can implement these standards globally." Victor Graves, who had been listening quietly, nodded in agreement. "The safety concerns are real, and we need to take them seriously. But we also can't forget that we're dealing with businesses, with industries that rely on this technology. We need to find a balance between regulation and freedom." "That's the challenge," Lucy said. "The innovation needs to continue, but it needs to be done responsibly." The conversation turned to the creation of a global registry for the technology, a system that would track every design, every prototype, and every innovation built off the open-source blueprints. This registry would allow the Council to monitor developments, ensuring that no rogue actors were taking the technology and using it irresponsibly. Jorge Cruz spoke up. "I think we need to ensure that we're not just looking at the technology in isolation. What we're really doing here is reshaping the future of transportation. This has the potential to change how people live and move around the world. We have to be mindful of how it will impact society as a whole." As the meeting progressed, the weight of responsibility settled on Lucy's shoulders. This wasn't just about creating a tech product anymore, it was about shaping the future of humanity. The Council had the power to guide the direction of an entire movement, and she would have to lead them through the minefield of corporate interests, political pressures, and global expectations. By the time the meeting came to a close, they had set a tentative framework. They had agreed on the principles of sustainability, safety, and collaboration. The next step would be to present this framework to the world, particularly to the governments who would need to support their efforts. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, media interviews, and press conferences. Lucy had become the face of the revolution, and as much as she tried to avoid the spotlight, it was clear that this was her moment. But with the attention came scrutiny. Every decision she made was analyzed, every word she spoke dissected. The pressure was relentless. Then, just when it seemed like the council had found its footing, another challenge emerged. Late one evening, Lucy received an encrypted message from an anonymous source. It was a warning. "We know what you're doing. And we won't let you take control of this. Not without a fight." The anonymous threat sent a chill down Lucy's spine. It was a reminder that not everyone would play by the rules. There were those who wanted to control this revolution for their own gain, and they weren't afraid to do whatever it took to stop her. Lucy clenched her fists. This fight was far from over. The encrypted message was a chilling reminder that Lucy was not just battling for the future of transportation, she was fighting to control a revolution. But as the days passed, the true scale of the threat became clearer. It wasn't just rogue developers or disgruntled entrepreneurs who were resisting the movement. Powerful forces, both corporate and political, had begun to target her. Some wanted to shut down the open-source movement entirely. Others wanted to manipulate it to serve their own agendas. And at the very heart of it all was the technology she had created, too valuable, too disruptive, and too uncontrollable for some. The anonymous message sent by the shadowy figure had shaken Lucy, but it was far from the last warning she received. In fact, it was just the beginning. The next night, an unexpected visitor arrived at her office. Elon Musk, who had been acting as an advisor and supporter throughout the formation of the council, stood in the doorway. He didn't look like himself, his usual confidence had been replaced by something more somber. "Lucy, we need to talk," Elon said, walking in and closing the door behind him. "I've been getting threats," Lucy said without preamble, the urgency in her voice clear. "Someone doesn't want this movement to succeed. They know what we're trying to do, and they're coming for us." Elon nodded. "I've been getting the same. But it's bigger than just the threats. There's a coordinated push from some very powerful entities. They're using their influence in ways we can't even begin to understand." Lucy's heart raced. "Who are they? What do they want?" Elon hesitated before answering. "I'm not sure yet. But I've been doing some digging. The message you got wasn't just a random warning, it's connected to something much bigger. There's a network, a group of tech monopolies, and even some government players, who see your revolution as a direct threat to their control. They'll stop at nothing to sabotage it." Lucy's mind spun. She had known there would be opposition, but this? This was on a scale she hadn't anticipated. She had created something that was shaking the foundations of industries and governments. And now, those very entities were fighting back. "We need to be ready," Elon said, his voice resolute. "These people don't play by the rules. They'll try to discredit you, steal your designs, and manipulate public opinion. If we want this revolution to survive, we need to fight fire with fire." The next few days were a blur. Lucy threw herself into organizing the council's next steps, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every move she made, every word she spoke, seemed to be scrutinized by unseen eyes. Elon was right, these enemies weren't going to let her succeed without a fight. But Lucy was determined. She wouldn't let the world she had envisioned slip away into the hands of those who wanted to control it for their own gain. One evening, as Lucy sat in a dimly lit office, reviewing the council's plans, a call came through. It was from Amina Al-Mansour, one of the key members of the council. "Lucy, we need to talk," Amina's voice sounded tense. "There's something you need to know." "What is it?" Lucy asked, her stomach tightening. "I've been contacted by a high-ranking official. They're pressuring us to abandon the open-source model. They claim that the potential for misuse is too great and that the risks outweigh the rewards. They've hinted that unless we comply, there will be serious consequences for our reputation and for the future of the technology." Lucy's mind raced. Who's behind this? Is it a government official? "I can't say for certain," Amina replied, her voice low. "But I think we've already crossed a line. Some of these people will stop at nothing to take control." As the pressure mounted, the council members began to fracture. Some were tempted by the promises of power and influence from the entities trying to control the revolution. Others, like Jorge Cruz, were worried that Lucy's idealism was blinding her to the dangers ahead. The cracks in their unity were starting to show. In private meetings, Lucy could feel the tension building. She had always known that creating something this powerful would come with its fair share of challenges, but this? This was a war on multiple fronts. It wasn't long before the first attack came. Late one night, a hacker broke into the open-source registry. The entire system was compromised. The designs for the LMP-X1 and all of its offshoots were stolen. The hackers had left a chilling message: "We told you this technology wasn't yours to control." Lucy's heart sank. The very technology that she had worked so hard to create, the open-source vision she had poured her soul into, was now in the hands of someone else. It was clear that these forces were trying to undermine everything she had built. Elon was the first to reach out. "Lucy, this is bad. The registry breach, it wasn't just about stealing the tech. This was a message. Someone wants to shut you down. They've got your designs, and now they've got the leverage. We have to get it back," Lucy said, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "This is our fight. I won't let them take this from us." The council called an emergency meeting the following day. The tension in the room was palpable. Amina was the first to speak. "We need to take drastic measures. This breach, the pressure from governments and corporations, if we don't act now, we risk losing everything. We have to take control back." "I agree," Victor Graves said, his tone unusually forceful. "But we need to be strategic. Going public with this could ruin us. We need to gather intelligence, understand who's behind this, and then make our move." Lucy felt a rush of frustration. She understood the need for caution, but she also knew that time was running out. The enemy was already making its move. That night, Lucy didn't sleep. She spent hours with her team, tracking down every lead, every digital footprint that might lead them to the culprits behind the breach. They had to act quickly before the technology was used against them. But as the hours wore on, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that the war she had started was just beginning. The next day, she received another message, this time from a familiar name. "You're not the only one fighting for control of the future, Lucy. You'll learn that soon enough." The message was signed only with a symbol, a black circle, with a line cutting through the middle. Lucy stared at the glowing screen in front of her, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The last 24 hours had been a whirlwind. The breach of the open-source registry had shaken her to the core, and now, with the stolen technology in the hands of shadowy figures, every minute counted. The clock was ticking, and the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She had spent hours with her team, going over every possible angle. They had tracked the breach to a remote server hidden deep in the data center of a private tech conglomerate, one that had been on the council's radar for some time. The company, known as Novatech Industries, was an enigma. Its leaders operated in the shadows, with no clear public face. But one thing was certain, they had the resources, and now they had the technology that Lucy had worked so hard to make public and accessible. "They're playing dirty," Lucy muttered to herself, her frustration mounting. "But we can't just sit back and let them take control. We have to hit them where it hurts." Her team, which included some of the brightest minds from the open-source community, had already begun to formulate a plan. They would infiltrate Novatech servers, retrieve the stolen designs, and expose the company's role in the breach. But the challenge was enormous. Novatech wasn't just a small-time player, it was a global powerhouse with connections in both government and business. "What's our first move?" asked Amina, joining her at the table. The climate scientist had been on edge since the breach. It was clear to her that the revolution wasn't just about technology anymore, it was a fight for the future of the world itself. "We need to trace the stolen files," Lucy replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "If we can find out where they're planning to use the designs, we can cut them off before they make their next move." But we need to be quick. Do you think they'll try to mass-produce the planes? Amina asked. If they do, it'll be too late to stop them. The damage will be done. I don't think that's their first move, Lucy said thoughtfully. They'll want to leverage the technology for something bigger, something that gives them more power. They'll try to control it, to restrict access. That's their game. Victor Graves, who had been strangely quiet during the meeting, finally spoke up. You're underestimating them, Lucy. If they have the designs, they'll try to take control of the whole industry. And they won't just be playing games. They'll use everything they have to crush this revolution. Lucy looked at him sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm saying that if we don't act fast, Novatech will monopolize this technology before we even get a chance to implement our vision, Victor continued. And when they do, the entire open-source movement will be dead. The only way we can beat them is to strike first, before they have a chance to fully deploy their plan. Lucy paused, weighing Victor's words. He was right about one thing: if they didn't act, they'd be one step behind. Novatech had the resources and the influence to shut them down before they could get their hands on the technology again. But taking the offensive was a dangerous game. It was no longer just about technology, it was about power, control, and survival. We need to be smarter than that, Lucy said after a long pause. We can't just attack blindly. We need information. We need to know who's behind Novatech's moves. Victor raised an eyebrow. And how do you propose we do that? I've got a plan, she said, a determined glint in her eye. We get someone inside. For the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, preparing for the infiltration. It wasn't just about hacking Novatech servers or retrieving stolen files, they needed an insider, someone who could move through the company undetected, who could find the source of the breach and bring back vital intelligence. Elon Musk, who had been quietly monitoring the situation, offered a suggestion. I know someone who might be able to help. He's a former SpaceX engineer, a brilliant hacker, but he disappeared a few months ago after making a few enemies. He might have the connections we need to get someone inside Novatech without being detected. Lucy looked at Elon, impressed. Do you trust him? I trust his skills, Elon replied. He's a risk-taker, but when it comes to getting information, he's one of the best. Lucy hesitated, then nodded. We don't have time to waste. If he's our best shot, then let's do it. The hacker, whose name was Mason, was introduced to the team in an unassuming cafe on the outskirts of town. He was a scruffy, unkempt figure, with a sharp look in his eyes that gave away his intelligence and unpredictability. He listened carefully as Lucy explained the situation, outlining their plan to infiltrate Novatech's network. You want me to get inside their inner circle and find out who's running this operation? Mason asked, his voice low. I'll do it, but it's going to get messy. These people don't play fair, and neither do I. You're asking for trouble. Lucy's voice was calm but firm. We're already in trouble. We need this information, Mason. The future of everything we've built depends on it. Mason considered her words for a moment before grinning. All right. I'm in. But you better be ready for whatever comes next. It's never as simple as it seems. As the days passed, Mason moved quickly. He infiltrated Novatech's systems, using his connections and skills to weave through layers of firewalls, backdoors, and encrypted files. He uncovered disturbing information. The breach wasn't just about stealing technology, it was part of a larger plan to control the flow of future innovations. Novatech was working with government agencies to monopolize not only the aviation sector but several other key industries. Lucy sat in the conference room, reading the decrypted files Mason had sent. Her pulse quickened as she realized the extent of Novatech's plans. We've got them, she said, her voice steady. They're not just trying to steal our technology. They want to monopolize the future of innovation itself. Amina looked over her shoulder, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. This is worse than I thought. They're not just playing a game, they're trying to erase us. The next phase of their plan was set into motion. They would expose Novatech's actions to the world. The stolen technology, the political maneuvering, the corporate greed, they would all be laid bare. But as Lucy prepared to launch the counterattack, she knew the stakes had never been higher. This was no longer a battle for control over an industry, it was a fight for the very future of innovation, and for the survival of the open-source movement. The world was on the brink of change, but it wasn't going to be easy. The message Lucy had prepared, one that would expose Novatech and the political networks behind it, was ready. But as the time approached to push the button, she couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of dread that had settled in her chest. It was no longer just about technology. It was about power. And Lucy knew that the moment she exposed Novatech's plans, nothing would ever be the same again. She sat in the war room, surrounded by her closest advisors, all of them awaiting her decision. The plan was set, the data was ready to be unleashed to the media. But there was one question still looming over everything. What happens next? Victor Graves leaned over the table, his brow furrowed with worry. Lucy, we've got one shot at this. If we push forward with this, there's no turning back. We're not just fighting Novatech anymore, we're taking on an entire system. Governments, corporations, they'll come after us. They'll stop at nothing. I know, Lucy replied, her voice firm. But this is the only way. If we don't expose them now, they'll control everything. The open-source revolution will be dead before it even has a chance to take off. We don't have the luxury of waiting anymore. Amina, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, spoke up. I get it, Lucy. But what about the people who've supported us? What about the workers, the communities we've promised to help? If we go public with this, we might be endangering them. They'll be caught in the crossfire. Lucy's gaze hardened. I won't let them get hurt. We'll make sure they're protected, Amina. But we have to expose this. If we back down now, we've lost. There's no turning back. Elon Musk had been monitoring the situation from the background. Though he had stayed mostly silent, his presence loomed large. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I've been in this game a long time. This isn't just about open source anymore. This is the future of innovation. If we let them get away with it, no one will ever trust a revolutionary idea again. Lucy nodded. Exactly. This isn't just about planes or technology. This is about changing the way the world operates, breaking free from the old power structures that have kept us down. We have to do this for the future, not just for us. The team worked tirelessly through the night, double-checking the information they were about to release. Every file, every piece of evidence was carefully scrutinized. They couldn't afford a mistake, not when so much was at stake. But despite the intense focus, Lucy's mind kept drifting back to the shadowy figure that had first warned her. You're not the only one fighting for control of the future, Lucy. The message had been clear. She wasn't alone in this fight. And the people who were coming after her were no amateurs. They were playing for keeps. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Lucy made her decision. She tapped the button, and the information began to flood the world. The files, the evidence, the full extent of Novatech's conspiracy, it was all out there now. And then they waited. It didn't take long for the first wave of reactions to come in. The media exploded. News outlets across the world began covering the story. Governments issued statements, trying to distance themselves from Novatech and deny any involvement. Corporate representatives scrambled to downplay their connections to the conglomerate. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. An encrypted message appeared on Lucy's screen. It was from Mason, the hacker who had infiltrated Novatech's systems. The subject line was short, "They're not alone." The message inside was even more chilling. I've traced the signal back to multiple locations, high-security government installations, private tech firms, even military contractors. Novatech is just the beginning. There's a much larger network, and they're coming for you. Prepare for the worst. Lucy stared at the message, her heart pounding. She had known the stakes were high, but this was bigger than anything she had imagined. It wasn't just a few corporate entities trying to maintain control. It was a web of power, stretching across governments, tech companies, and military-industrial complexes. They were all connected. And they were all coming for her. "We've just lit the fuse," Lucy said quietly, her eyes scanning the message again. Amina's voice broke the silence. "What does this mean?" "We've exposed them." "Isn't that the goal?" Elon, too, looked troubled. "It means we've kicked the hornet's nest, Lucy. We've made some powerful enemies, and they won't stop until they've taken us down. They'll use every resource at their disposal to crush this revolution." As the realization set in, a heavy silence fell over the room. The scale of what they had just done hit them all at once. The battle for the future had begun, and it wasn't going to be easy. Hours later, the first blow came. A massive cyber attack hit their systems, shutting down communication lines and threatening to erase every shred of data they had. Lucy's heart raced as she watched the systems go down one by one. "We need to fight back," Victor said, his voice low and tense. "They've already started their counterattack." "We have a plan for this," Lucy said, rallying the team. "We've prepared for this. Let's make sure they know that we're not going down without a fight." The team worked quickly, initiating their own defense measures. They activated encrypted channels, locked down critical systems, and launched counterhacks to trace the origin of the attack. But as the hours stretched on, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that they were losing ground. With every move they made, the enemy seemed to anticipate it. The next attack came almost as soon as they fended off the last one. It was clear, they were up against a force that had far more resources and experience than they could ever have imagined. And then came the personal attacks. Lucy's social media accounts were flooded with false accusations, threats, and smear campaigns. Videos were released, showing doctored footage designed to make her look like a fraud. Articles appeared, claiming that her revolution was a cover for a global conspiracy to destroy the economy. The attacks were relentless. Is this really how it's going to go? Lucy asked herself quietly, staring at the avalanche of negativity surrounding her. But despite the onslaught, there was something inside Lucy that refused to break. She had started this revolution with a belief in the power of open-source innovation, and she wasn't going to let it be destroyed. Not now. Not when they were so close. "We're in this together," she said, turning to her team. "And we're going to fight back. We won't let them destroy what we've built. We will keep pushing forward, no matter the cost." The stakes had never been higher. The revolution was now a global war. And Lucy was ready to face whatever came next. The weight of the world was heavier than ever. Lucy sat in the darkness of the war room, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Every move they made was being countered, every plan undone. The attacks were relentless, coming from all sides: cyber attacks, media smear campaigns, and even personal threats that infiltrated her private life. It was as if the entire system had united to crush everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed. Another encrypted message from Mason. She hesitated before opening it, already knowing it wouldn't be good news. "They're getting closer. I've tracked more activity, military-grade tech and a new mercenary group hired to neutralize you. They've begun targeting key members of your team." Lucy's heart dropped. They had known the stakes were high, but this was war, pure and simple. Every moment she sat there, people she cared about were at risk. Victor, Amina, Elon, all of them were targets. "We can't keep going like this," Amina's voice broke through her thoughts, sounding strained. "They've broken through our systems. We're being hunted. Everyone we've ever worked with is exposed. How do we fight back when they control everything?" Lucy stood up abruptly, her eyes scanning the room. Every screen, every line of code flashing before her seemed like a reminder of how far they'd fallen. They had fought so hard for the open-source revolution. It was meant to be the future of innovation, the great equalizer. But now it felt like a distant dream, slipping through her fingers with each passing moment. They control the media. They control the government. They control the narrative, Victor said, his voice grim. We can't outthink them anymore. They have too much power. But we still have one thing they don't, Lucy snapped, her voice suddenly sharp, fueled by the realization that despite everything, they still had hope. We still have each other. We're not backing down. But deep down, Lucy wasn't so sure. The fight had taken so much from her. The sleepless nights, the broken relationships, the constant pressure. It felt like there was no end to it, no way to escape the crushing tide of forces working against them. The revolution she had once seen as a beacon of hope now felt like a sinking ship. As if on cue, a notification pinged on her screen. A video, an unmarked link from an anonymous source. She clicked it, her breath catching in her throat as the footage began to play. It was a montage, images of her team, their faces captured at public events, their voices from past interviews, all twisted into a narrative that painted them as terrorists, as traitors to the world. The media had latched onto the story, turning the revolution into an existential threat. They had become the enemy. And then the final blow. A direct threat. Lucy Taylor, if you do not disband your revolution, you will pay the price. This is your last warning. Her hands trembled as she closed the video. This was more than just a smear campaign, it was a direct challenge, a message that they were prepared to make good on their threat. We've lost, Amina said quietly, her face pale as she watched the same video. This isn't a fight we can win anymore. No. Lucy shook her head, a flicker of determination lighting up in her eyes. We're not done yet. We have to find another way. But as the hours turned into days, their options began to dwindle. Every place they turned, they encountered new obstacles. The team was disbanding. Victor was being forced into hiding after his own involvement became public. Amina, once so sure of their mission, was beginning to doubt the path they had chosen. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Lucy, Amina admitted late one night, her voice shaking with fear and frustration. I thought we were doing the right thing, but now, everything's falling apart. Lucy had no easy answers. She understood Amina's doubts. The pressure, the constant feeling of being hunted, the weight of losing everything, it was suffocating. Lucy had always been the one to lead them forward, but now, she found herself questioning everything, too. Maybe we've lost, Lucy said softly, sitting down next to her. But that doesn't mean it's over. The world won't forget what we've started. Even if we have to rebuild from nothing, the revolution won't die. It can't. Just when Lucy felt as though the walls were closing in, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Elon Musk, who had been silently working behind the scenes, reached out to her. His message was cryptic, yet strangely hopeful. I've been talking to some old allies. The fight is far from over. We still have one weapon they didn't count on, the people. You've inspired a global movement. We've got the support, Lucy. Now, we just need to take it back. The message came as a lifeline. Maybe the system was too big to defeat head-on. Maybe they couldn't win this war with technology alone. But there was still power in numbers. The people who had once rallied around the open-source revolution were still out there. They had been silenced, but they hadn't been defeated. Lucy sat with her team in the dim light of the war room, the weight of their options pressing heavily on them. We've tried everything, she said, her voice full of frustration. But what if the solution isn't about taking down the system directly? What if it's about rallying the people, making them realize they have the power? If they understand what's at stake, we can ignite a global movement. We don't need to win every battle, we need to win the war. For the first time in days, hope flickered in the eyes of her team. It was a dangerous plan, one that could either reignite the revolution or burn it to the ground. But it was the only chance they had left. Lucy stood, her voice resolute. "We're not done yet. This isn't just about technology. It's about the future. It's about the people. If they stand with us, we have a chance." The descent was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. But as Lucy took her first steps into the next phase of the revolution, she realized something: no matter how far they fell, they would never be defeated. As long as they kept fighting, as long as they kept moving forward, the revolution would live on. The world had grown quieter. But the silence was deceptive. Underneath the calm, a storm was brewing, a revolution that was beginning to take on a life of its own. Lucy Taylor had made her choice. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions anymore. The people had to rise. The movement couldn't die. If they stood together, they could change everything. But the question was, could she inspire them in time? Lucy sat at her desk, staring at the glowing map of the world on her screen. It showed locations of every rally, every small act of rebellion sparked by the revolution. The revolution hadn't died, it had only grown, silently spreading across the globe. There were whispers, encrypted messages, and encrypted forums where like-minded people were gathering. They were ready for change, but they needed direction. The people were still with her. The system had underestimated them. "Now, we need to show them we're not afraid," Lucy muttered under her breath, clenching her fist. "The time to fight back is now." Victor, Elon, and Amina gathered around the table, their faces determined. They had been through the hardest part, endless setbacks, betrayals, personal losses. Yet, here they were, still standing, still fighting. Together. "Lucy," Victor began, his voice steady but urgent, "it's time. We can't hide anymore. The people are watching us. They're waiting for us to make the first move. If we're going to win, we have to show them we're serious. We have to show them that we won't be silenced." Lucy nodded, her resolve hardening. "We will make it public. We'll release everything. All the proof, the evidence of what Novatech and the governments have done. But we'll do it with one difference: this time, we do it with the people." For weeks, the team had been preparing for this moment. They had worked to build connections, gathering encrypted files, and laying the groundwork for a campaign that would unite the world. They knew the risks, the dangers. There were more enemies than they had ever imagined, powerful forces who would do anything to shut them down. But the world was waking up. The first wave of broadcasts went out. It wasn't just a single broadcast or a post on a website, it was a coordinated movement. Global networks, social media platforms, and underground communications channels were all mobilized. For the first time, the truth about Novatech's conspiracy was being shown in real time to millions of people. The videos, the stolen documents, the covert meetings, all of it was exposed. And the people were listening. The response was immediate. What had started as whispers began to grow into a roar. People began flooding the streets in cities across the globe, demanding justice, calling for accountability. The government offices and corporate headquarters that had once seemed untouchable were now targets of protests and demonstrations. But as the revolution gained momentum, so did the retaliation. The news cycles were full of damning stories. The government stepped in, labeling Lucy and her movement as domestic terrorists. The global media machines, once complicit, now launched a full-scale counterattack to discredit her and the revolution. Fake news spread like wildfire. Videos were manipulated to frame Lucy as a dangerous radical. They called her a threat to global security, to the very fabric of society. But the truth had already been unleashed. And once the people knew, there was no turning back. In the middle of it all, Lucy received a call from Elon. His voice was calm but filled with a sense of urgency. "Lucy, the pushback is already intense. They're blocking every channel we have left. We need to make our next move fast. They're deploying everything they have to shut us down. Lucy's heart raced. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. I know. But we're not backing down. We can't stop now. The people are with us, Elon. This is their fight too. We'll push forward and keep moving, no matter what they throw at us. Days turned into weeks. The streets grew more chaotic as protests erupted in cities from New York to Tokyo, from Berlin to Sao Paulo. People who had never dreamed of taking a stand were now risking everything for a cause they believed in. They were rising up against the system that had once seemed unbreakable. Lucy stood at the forefront of it all, her every move watched by millions. The media focused on her every word, every action. But she no longer feared the spotlight. She knew what she was fighting for, and she wasn't going to let the lies or threats stop her. The revolution was no longer just about technology or open source, it was about freedom. It was about breaking the chains that had bound humanity for so long. It was about the future. But with the uprising growing stronger, the response from those in power grew more desperate. The governments began moving in a coordinated effort to quash the revolution. They shut down internet access in entire regions. They arrested key figures within the movement, including some of Lucy's closest allies. The military was deployed to suppress protests with force. One night, as Lucy was preparing for another broadcast, an alert flashed on her screen. The message was clear, they're coming for you. Victor, his face pale, rushed into the room. We have to move, Lucy. They've got the military on the way. They're going to shut this down tonight. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew what that meant, if they took her down, the revolution would lose its figurehead. The message would be silenced. But there was one last option. One chance. Start the broadcast, Lucy ordered, her voice unwavering. No matter what happens, we'll finish this. We'll let the people hear the truth. As she stood in front of the camera, preparing for her final message, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on her. She knew the risks, this could be the last broadcast they ever made. But it didn't matter. The truth had to be told. The camera turned on. People of the world, Lucy began, her voice strong despite the storm of emotions churning inside her, you've been lied to. The revolution is not just mine, it's ours. It's for every single person who has ever felt oppressed, who has ever been silenced, who has ever been told they don't have a voice. We are the future, and they cannot control us any longer. She paused, her eyes glistening with determination. They can take our systems. They can block our channels. But they cannot take our spirit. We will rise. Together. And just as the feed began to cut out, just as the walls around her started to close in, Lucy felt something change. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defeat. It was the beginning of something new. The people were already rising. And now, Lucy had given them the rallying cry they needed. The air had grown thick with tension. The streets that had once been filled with hope and defiance were now choked with chaos. The revolution, once a spark, had grown into an inferno, and the flames were now consuming everything in their path. But as the fire spread, so too did the destruction. The world's power structures had been shaken, and those at the top would stop at nothing to crush it. Lucy sat in the makeshift war room, her mind racing. The broadcasts, the protests, the rallies, they had worked. But now, the consequences were becoming impossible to ignore. Every day, new reports came in, governments were mobilizing forces, military units were raiding protest sites, key leaders in the movement had been captured, and the internet was being systematically shut down in regions sympathetic to the revolution. The backlash was swift, and it was brutal. Are we ready to move forward with Phase 2? Elon asked, his face grim as he stared at the news reports flickering across the screen. The people are still with us, but we need more than just rallies. We need action. Lucy's eyes narrowed, her thoughts turning inward. Phase 2. The plan they had been working on for months, the backup strategy. If things got worse, if the government escalated their crackdown, Phase 2 was meant to be their last card. It was a high-risk maneuver, one that could either shift the balance of power in their favor or completely decimate what was left of the revolution. Yes, she finally said, her voice calm but filled with determination. We move forward with Phase 2. We need to take back the infrastructure that controls the narrative. As the plan unfolded, the tension inside the revolution's inner circle was palpable. Phase 2 wasn't just about exposing corruption or rallying the people anymore. It was about dismantling the systems that had allowed corruption to thrive. The power grids, the data centers, the media channels, they were all part of the machinery that upheld the status quo. If they could seize these critical points, they could bring the system to its knees. But there was a danger that Lucy couldn't ignore. The world was watching, waiting for a misstep, a moment of weakness. If they weren't careful, Phase 2 could spiral out of control. If they failed, it could mean the end, not just of the revolution, but of everything they had worked for. Meanwhile, outside their safe houses, the situation was getting worse by the hour. The streets were now scenes of constant conflict. Soldiers patrolled the protests, their armored vehicles rolling down avenues where people had once marched for freedom. Riot gear clashed with the makeshift signs of revolution. The revolutionaries had once been united in their pursuit of a common goal, but now they were splintering. Some feared what the escalation would bring, and others saw it as the only way to finish what they had started. Victor, standing by the window in the war room, let out a frustrated sigh. If we don't act now, they'll suffocate the movement. They're already infiltrating our ranks, turning supporters into informants. I know, Lucy replied quietly. But we can't just rush in. We need to be strategic. This is more than just fighting for power. It's about creating a future that doesn't fall into the same mistakes we're fighting against. Elon looked at her, the weight of the situation sinking in. The system is resilient. If we don't take control now, we may never get another chance. It was the middle of the night when the first phase of their counterattack began. With covert teams deployed across key cities, Lucy and her team initiated a series of calculated strikes against the infrastructure. In New York, the media center that had been used to broadcast pro-government propaganda was hacked and shut down. In Berlin, the central energy grid was temporarily redirected, cutting power to government-controlled buildings. In London, key satellite stations were disabled, disrupting communications between military forces. The operations were swift, precise, and, for the moment, successful. But Lucy knew the fight wasn't over. As they cut off the system's ability to control the narrative, the government and its allies would retaliate with everything they had. Hours later, Lucy received an encrypted message from Amina. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of an entire revolution. It's happening. They're going full force now. We need to make our next move, and it has to be bigger than anything we've done before. Lucy stood in the war room, staring at the message. Her mind raced as she thought about the next steps. What did Amina mean by bigger? They had already attacked the core of the infrastructure, what could possibly come next? And then it hit her. It wasn't about taking down the infrastructure. It was about taking down the entire system. They needed to expose everything, the corruption, the manipulation, the deceit that had fueled the system's rise. If they couldn't destroy it, they would dismantle it piece by piece, starting with the people who had profited most from it. By dawn, the revolution had entered a new phase. Lucy and her team made a daring decision, one that would have been unthinkable only weeks before. They were going after the elites. The corporations, the politicians, the power brokers who had profited off the suffering of the masses. The people needed to see who the true enemies were, and they needed to understand how deep the corruption ran. Elon led the charge on the financial front. Using a combination of hacking and strategic leaks, they exposed the most secretive financial deals that had kept the system afloat. Victor worked on orchestrating a series of live broadcasts that would reveal the hidden truth behind government surveillance programs and corporate malfeasance. Meanwhile, Amina coordinated a global media blitz, releasing the proof they had gathered over the past months to journalists and news outlets willing to broadcast it. But just as the revolution seemed to be on the cusp of success, the consequences of their actions began to unfold in unexpected ways. The government launched a massive crackdown, using the full force of their military and intelligence apparatus. Key figures in the revolution were arrested, and Lucy knew it was only a matter of time before they would come for her too. "Where do we go from here?" Amina asked, her voice strained as the news of their allies' capture spread. "This was supposed to be our victory. But now it feels like we've crossed a line we can't come back from." Lucy's eyes met Amina's, filled with a mix of sadness and resolve. "We've already crossed that line. There's no going back now. But this," she paused, looking at her team, "this is just the beginning. We are not done. The reckoning is just starting." As the forces aligned against them, Lucy knew that the revolution's reckoning had begun. But there was one thing she was sure of: no matter how hard the opposition fought, the truth was out. The people were awake. And nothing could silence them now. The world was unraveling. What had once been a series of hopeful protests, whispers of revolution, and covert operations had now become a global crisis. The power that Lucy and her team had fought to dismantle was fighting back with everything in its arsenal. The revolution, which had ignited the hopes of millions, was now on the brink of collapse. And in the middle of it all, Lucy stood, no longer the fearless leader she once was, but a woman holding on to a fragile thread of hope. It was a cold morning when the first strike came. Lucy sat at the control center, her eyes fixed on the screen. The encrypted communication systems had been hacked again. This time, it wasn't just the media. It wasn't just the internet. It was everything. The power grids had been locked down. Cell networks were crashing. The airwaves were filled with government announcements declaring martial law, a curfew, and a full-scale military response to the uprising. And then the bombshell, the arrests. Key figures in the revolution had been captured, including Victor and Amina. The news spread like wildfire. The people who had once been the pillars of the movement were now prisoners of war, silenced and shackled. And Lucy knew that she was next. "We can't keep running, Lucy," Elon said, his voice filled with grim realization as he looked at the news feed. "They're closing in on us. The military's already tracking our every move. We've lost control of the streets. They've got us cornered." Lucy felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "We haven't lost yet." But deep down, she knew. The odds were overwhelming. The revolution had been hit hard. The support from the people was wavering. Fear was spreading, and with it, the belief that resistance was futile. The revolutionaries, once an unstoppable force, had now been forced into hiding. The last pockets of the resistance were scattered in underground bunkers, safe houses, and encrypted networks. But the once hopeful message of change had been drowned out by a tidal wave of government control and media manipulation. The establishment had regained control of the narrative. And with it, they had begun to rewrite the story. The revolution wasn't a righteous fight for freedom anymore, it was a dangerous insurrection that threatened global security. Lucy had watched as the media turned her from a symbol of hope to a villainous figure, a terrorist who would stop at nothing to destroy the very fabric of society. But as much as the weight of the world seemed to be collapsing around her, Lucy wasn't ready to give up. "Not yet. We need a way out," Elon said, his mind already working through the possible solutions. "They're coming for us. They've isolated us from the rest of the world. If we don't act now, we're done for." Lucy's eyes hardened. "We'll make them act first. We've always had the upper hand in the shadows. Let's use that to our advantage. We still have the truth, Elon. They can take everything else, but they can't take that." That night, Lucy made a decision. A dangerous one. One that could either spark the end of the revolution or ignite the flames of a new uprising. It was time for the truth to be broadcast, not just to the people in the streets or the underground networks, but to the entire world. They had the footage, the documents, the proof. All the lies, the manipulation, the dark secrets of the global elite. It was all stored safely, hidden in plain sight. But now it was time to reveal it all. "We have one chance at this," Lucy said, addressing her remaining team members. "If we release everything now, everything we have, it will expose them for what they really are. We'll show the world that the revolution wasn't just about power. It was about freedom. It was about truth." With the decision made, they set the plan into motion. Using the last remnants of their encrypted channels, they began to leak the data. It wasn't just a few documents or a single piece of evidence. It was everything they had gathered over the months, every illegal deal, every corrupt transaction, every scheme designed to crush the people for the benefit of the few. As the data was broadcast, the world reacted. People woke up to the full scope of what had been done in the shadows. Corporations that had manipulated governments were named and shamed. The military's role in suppressing dissent was exposed. Political leaders who had taken bribes, who had waged wars for profit, were outed. The scale of corruption was unimaginable. And the world could no longer ignore it. But the power of the elite wasn't going to let this stand. The governments weren't going to allow their dirty laundry to be aired for long. They moved quickly to shut down the broadcasts, to censor the leaks, to contain the damage. They called it a massive cyber attack and labeled Lucy and her team as international terrorists. But the truth was out there. And for the first time, the people were listening. As the broadcasts continued, Lucy watched as millions of people around the world began to take to the streets once more. It wasn't just a protest anymore. It wasn't just about rallying for a cause. This was a movement. A global movement that had been ignited by the truth. People from all walks of life, from every country and culture, were coming together, united in their desire for justice. They could no longer ignore the corruption that had poisoned their lives for so long. But the backlash was swift. The government's response was brutal. Martial law was declared in every city where the protests had erupted. The streets were flooded with military forces, and the people who had risen up were now being suppressed with violence. Thousands were arrested, and many more were injured or killed. And in the midst of it all, Lucy received the call she had feared. "We've got her," a voice said on the other end of the line. "They've found us. The next move is yours." Her heart sank as the implications set in. They had been found. The revolution had reached its apex, and now, it was all about survival. She had one choice left. It wasn't just about taking down the system anymore. It was about surviving to fight another day. Lucy knew that if she and her team were captured, everything would end. The revolution would be crushed, the truth hidden once more. And all that they had sacrificed would be for nothing. "Get ready," Lucy said quietly, her voice a whisper of determination. "We're not done yet." The world outside had turned into a war zone. The revolution had sparked a fire across the globe, but now that fire was being extinguished by the iron fist of the establishment. Lucy stood in the shadows of their final hideout, watching the chaos unfold on the streets through the grimy window. The news was a constant stream of the government's crackdown, riots, military operations, curfews, and mass arrests. They were running out of time. Elon sat beside her, his eyes glued to his device, his fingers flying over the screen. "They're closing in on our location. It's only a matter of hours before they find us." Lucy's jaw clenched. She had always known the risks. She had always understood that the revolution wouldn't come without consequences. But the scale of the retaliation had shocked even her. The elites had gone full throttle, using every resource at their disposal to root out the revolutionaries. But there was no turning back now. She had to keep going, no matter the cost. "We need to leave," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Now." Elon looked at her, his face grave. "Where will we go? The world's hunting us. There's no place to hide anymore." Lucy didn't have an answer. All she knew was that they couldn't stay here. They needed to disappear, regroup, and figure out their next move. The revolution was far from over, and the people were still rising, but their survival depended on getting out of this alive. "We'll figure it out," she said. "We've always adapted. We have to keep fighting." The plan was simple: they would leave the safe house and disappear into the network of underground safe houses that remained, using the last of their encrypted communications to coordinate with their allies. But nothing had ever been simple in their fight. As they made their way through the hidden passageways of their safe house, a sudden blast shook the walls. The government was here. "Move! Move!" Lucy shouted, adrenaline surging through her body. She knew the moment they'd been discovered, the pursuit would be relentless. It wasn't just a matter of escaping, it was a matter of surviving long enough to fight back. They sprinted down the narrow alleyways of the city, the sound of boots pounding behind them. The air was thick with the stench of smoke, a reminder that every protest, every march, had led them to this point. Every street they turned down was familiar, but now it was a battleground. The police were everywhere, and military drones hovered overhead, scanning for any sign of life. "Keep moving," Elon yelled, grabbing Lucy by the arm and pulling her along. They passed by an overturned car, the remnants of a barricade from the night before. The city, once a symbol of rebellion, was now a war zone. Lucy could hear the distant sound of sirens, but it wasn't just the police coming. The military was mobilizing. They were closing in, tightening their grip on every corner, leaving no place for Lucy and her team to hide. After what felt like an eternity of running, they reached the underground train system, the last safe passage out of the city. A quiet place, hidden in the shadows. Lucy and her team had used this tunnel network before, during their earliest days of the revolution, when they first began gathering support. It had always been a lifeline, a route to safety, but now it felt like their only hope. "How long until we reach the safe zone?" Amina asked, breathless, her eyes wide with fear. Her face was pale, the weight of the past few days bearing down on her. But in her eyes, there was still a flicker of determination. They had made it this far, she refused to give up now. Lucy glanced at her watch. "We've got 20 minutes at most. We have to be ready." The train rumbled through the darkened tunnel, the sound of its approach echoing against the steel walls. It felt like the only thing that hadn't been destroyed. As they boarded, Lucy and her team crowded into the first car, the tension hanging thick in the air. "Is this really going to work?" Victor asked, his voice shaky. He had been one of the first to realize the revolution was no longer just about ideals, it was about survival. He'd seen too many friends fall. Too many dreams shattered. But he was still here, still fighting, and that gave him strength. "We'll make it work," Lucy said, her voice firm. "We always have. And this time, we can't afford to fail." The train raced through the underground, the only light coming from the dim flickers of old fluorescent bulbs. Every moment felt like it could be their last. The tension was palpable, but Lucy kept her eyes forward, focused on what lay ahead. They had made it this far. They had crossed lines that no one else had dared to cross. They had stood against powers that had crushed every attempt at change for generations. But no matter how far they ran, no matter how many miles they covered, Lucy knew one thing for certain: the government wasn't going to stop until they were all in chains. They reached the safe zone just as they heard the unmistakable sound of helicopters overhead. The authorities were onto them. They had to get off the train, into the underground base, and disappear once more. "Move quickly," Lucy shouted, as the team rushed off the train and into the tunnel. They weren't safe yet. They had to reach the final safe house, the one place that remained untouched, the one place where they could regroup and plan their next steps. They made it inside the safe house just as the first wave of military personnel stormed the tunnel entrance. The walls vibrated with the sounds of gunfire from outside. The government was relentless, but for the moment, Lucy and her team had found a brief moment of respite. "How long can we stay here?" Amina asked, her voice tight with fear. "Not long," Lucy replied, wiping the sweat from her brow. "But we have what we need. The revolution isn't over yet. The world is still watching. We have one shot left, and we can't afford to fail now." For the next few hours, they fortified their position, setting up defenses and ensuring the communications were up and running. They had the truth on their side, but the real fight was just beginning. As Lucy stood in the dimly lit room, the walls closing in around her, she knew that the road ahead was perilous. But in the face of their greatest challenge, one thing remained clear: they had started a fire, and there was no extinguishing it now. The revolution was not dead, it was just beginning its most dangerous phase. The air was thick with tension. Lucy stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out over the sprawling city that had once been the symbol of hope. Now, it was a battlefield. Fires burned in the streets below, smoke rising into the gray sky. The government had unleashed everything they had left to suppress the revolution. Their forces were everywhere: armed soldiers, drones, tanks, and surveillance cameras. The world's most powerful government was making its final move, and Lucy knew that they were coming for her and her team. But Lucy wasn't afraid. She had faced impossible odds before. She had watched friends fall, witnessed cities burn, and seen dreams shattered. But the fire of rebellion still burned inside her. She would not let the government crush everything they had fought for. Not without a fight. Elon approached, his face grim. "We don't have much time, Lucy. They've surrounded the area. The military's closing in on our position from every side. If we don't act now, we're done for." Lucy turned to face him, her expression calm. "We're not done yet. We're going to take the fight to them. We've come too far to back down now." Her voice rang with determination. The time had come for them to make their final stand. This was it, the last battle. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something much bigger. It was about sending a message that the revolution, no matter how many times it was beaten down, would rise again. They had one last weapon in their arsenal: the truth. The data they had leaked had ignited a spark across the globe. Protests, uprisings, and riots were still raging in cities worldwide. People were waking up to the corruption and lies that had been hidden from them for so long. And that was the key. The government couldn't silence the truth. Lucy and her team had infiltrated the highest levels of the establishment. They knew what the elites were hiding. They knew the dirty secrets. And now, it was time to expose them all, once and for all. Victor, Amina, and the rest of the team stood with Lucy, ready to carry out the final phase of the plan. It was dangerous. It was reckless. But it was the only chance they had left. "We need to get to the central communications hub," Lucy said, her voice low. "That's where we'll have the greatest impact. If we can get access to their global broadcast system, we can expose everything, the full extent of their corruption. They won't be able to cover it up this time." Elon nodded, already setting his mind on the technicalities. "I'll hack into their systems and take control. But we'll need to get close to their headquarters. And that's going to be the hardest part." The team moved swiftly through the shadows, using the chaos of the city to their advantage. The military's attention was focused on the streets, where the people were still rioting. Lucy's team had one goal: to infiltrate the heart of the government's operations and send the final message to the world. As they moved closer to the communications hub, the gravity of what they were about to do hit Lucy. This was it. They would either succeed and change the world, or they would be caught, silenced, and forgotten. There was no middle ground. But Lucy didn't have any doubts. Not now. They reached the outskirts of the communications center, a towering fortress surrounded by armed guards, drones, and high-tech security measures. It was impenetrable. But Lucy's team was prepared. They had spent months planning this, gathering intel, and anticipating the government's every move. Elon led the way, using his hacking skills to disable the perimeter security. The guards were distracted by the ongoing protests, unaware that the real threat was sneaking up from within their own ranks. Once inside, they worked quickly. Victor and Amina set up explosives near the key systems, while Elon went to work on the computers. "We have 5 minutes," Elon said. "Once I'm in, we'll have control of the entire broadcast network. But we have to be ready to move." The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. The government forces were closing in. But Lucy remained focused, her eyes locked on the screen in front of her. She knew that this was their only shot. If they failed, it would all be over. "Almost there," Elon muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Just a few more seconds." And then, with a sudden click, Elon grinned. "We're in. The broadcast system is ours." Lucy took a deep breath, stepping forward to address the world. "People of the world," she said, her voice carrying through the speakers. "For too long, the elites have ruled over us, manipulating us, controlling us. They've stolen our resources, they've silenced our voices, and they've crushed our dreams. But today, that ends." The footage that appeared on the screens around the globe was a compilation of everything the revolutionaries had gathered, documents, videos, and recordings that exposed the darkest secrets of the global elite. The evidence was undeniable. The government's corruption, their manipulation of power, their wars for profit, it was all laid bare for the world to see. "And this is just the beginning," Lucy continued, her voice growing stronger. "We will not stop until every last injustice is exposed. We will not stop until the people are free. The revolution is not a single battle, it is a movement. And we are just getting started." The broadcast was everywhere. On televisions, in the streets, on every screen. The people of the world watched as the truth unfolded before their eyes. And for the first time, they could no longer ignore it. But the response was swift and brutal. The government forces launched their final assault on Lucy's team. Explosions rocked the building as they tried to break through. The military stormed in, weapons drawn. "We need to go," Elon shouted, pulling Lucy away from the screen. "They'll be here any second." Lucy and her team fought their way out, taking down guards and military personnel as they went. The building was collapsing around them, but they couldn't stop now. They had done what they came to do. They had exposed the truth. Now they had to survive. They made it to the escape tunnel just as the building erupted in flames. The last of their resources were destroyed, but they had accomplished what they set out to do. The revolution had been broadcast to the world. The truth was out. And there was no going back. As Lucy and her team emerged into the dark streets, the sounds of distant protests still echoed in the air. The revolution was alive, and it was far from over. The world had changed, and they had been the ones to ignite that change. But Lucy knew one thing for certain, the fight was never going to be easy. It would take everything they had left to finish what they had started. And she was ready for it. The final stand has been made, and the revolution has sparked a global awakening. But with the government forces still closing in, what will happen next? Will Lucy and her team survive to see the new world they've fought for? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?